Yo, what's up, guys? We are live. We got Vosh joining us for a debate, so this is going to be interesting. You guys have requested this over and over again, and I'm glad we can make it happen. Okay, yeah. So let me just announce a few things. Um, I'm not. I'll be honest, Vosh. I'm not super familiar with your content. Like I watched a good amount of it today, so I think initially I'm gonna have to like flesh out your positions on certain things. So if I'm asking you questions that you've answered in videos, just bear with me. Um,
Absolutely.
I also think that we're not going to disagree nearly as much as most people think we will, but I guess we'll kind of get to the bottom of that. And one last thing I'll say, I respect you coming out for debate, dude. A lot of people are afraid to have discussions, are afraid to have debates. So if someone's willing to talk to someone who has different ideas than them, then they have my respect. Okay, so with that out of the way, I guess let me start off with this question. What do you agree and disagree with the red pill slash pickup community on?
Um, I disagree with quite a lot. I think there are some basic underlying tenets that make a lot of sense.
Okay.
Basically, the fact that women, people in general, but women, gravitate towards confidence, that it's important to do stuff like work out, basic self help advice like that. The
Okay.
issue is that I think there's a whole framework built around that, which involves the gamification of flirting with women to the point where you're checking off this really big list in your head of like making sure you've hit on all these steps. And I think that can be really detrimental. I think the most reliable step to be happy and to form good relationships at the end of the day is just treat women like regular ass people and just be cool with them, be confident, and you'll probably be fine. And if they aren't interested in you after all that, then that's fine. Maybe they're just not your type.
Okay. So what exactly is the claim in the red pill community that you would say? So it's more of like what the vibe of like I guess thinking of your interactions with women as like a game. Is that the thing or
Yeah, well, that's definitely a big part of it. It depends on where you are in the red pill community. The red pill subreddit, which I used to look at quite a bit, I mean, it
Mm,
literally had like people in favor of rape. So depending on how where you go in the spectrum, I'm going to disagree more or less. But
mm.
generally speaking, I feel like pickup artistry often like misses the point of social interaction, and it can be really difficult to form good relationships when you're so obsessed with following the archetype of like engagement with women.
Yeah, I would say that 99.99% of the red pill community would not be in favor of rape. Obviously, I think that goes without saying. But okay, so let's get into the I guess gamification. I see your point that it can be like if you're going off like you have like a weird checklist in your mind that can be kind of awkward and cringe. But what if you're a guy who has like just you don't have good social skills for whatever reason? Maybe you didn't have a good upbringing. Maybe you were bullied. Maybe you just no one ever explained to you, and like you just don't really understand how to talk to women. Like you just don't know what to do. And like what would be bad about having like some stuff in the background being like, okay, I should maybe flirt with her. I should move things forward. Like, do you see that as problematic?
No, I think it's important to keep some things in mind. It really depends on the type of advice that's being given. If
Mm,
you're socially stunted or something like that, I think it can be useful to practice talking to people. I think one of the biggest considerations, especially with talking to women,
mm,
is that there are some things that women consistently do socially differently from men. And a lot of that has to do with being afraid of men because men tend to be like predatory in a lot of social and physical interactions. So I feel like the big issue is like the big dichotomy is a lot of people want to open up and to be direct and engaged and to indicate their interest in somebody, but they also understand that they could come across as creepy if they do it in the wrong way. And that's where the whole meme, like, if you're ugly, you get called creepy. If you're hot, you get called flirty, comes about. And I think that keeping in mind, like, what can I do to make them feel comfortable? What can I do to avoid those pitfalls? That's good. But it shouldn't go, if it goes too far, then you've gone beyond keeping things in mind and you've gone to like keeping a checklist. And that I don't like.
mm. I mean, I don't know if we're even necessarily disagreeing on that point. I do think like if you have this very structured, rigid idea of what flirting and a man to woman interaction should be, that's probably going to be detrimental to your own success because then it's not going to feel organic. But I want to expand on what you said about the predatory thing. So, are you referring to like, are you saying that most men are predatory when they interact with women, or are you talking about like a small exception?
No, I don't think most men. I think I would say that most men are insufficiently aware of how their behavior can trigger red flags in women with regards to
Mhm.
predatory behavior. But that's not the same as being like deliberately predatory.
Right.
There are enough predatory men that most women, I think, have had an experience with them in some form or another. And that's definitely going to make them cautious. Like, for example, when I'm flirting with women, I don't have to be afraid of anything. Nobody's going to spike my drink. Nobody's going to attack me. There's no implicit or coercive threat that can work against me. You know, short of pulling a gun on me, I'm fine. And nobody, I don't think they're going to pull a gun on me. But that's not the case for everyone. So I think keeping that in mind, that implicit concern, is really important to make people feel comfortable.
Well, just to again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but yes, you're right. There's nothing you really have to worry about from a physical threat perspective in America. If you're like in Colombia, for example, the threat of being roofied and robbed is very real. It's happened to like multiple friends of mine. But yeah, in America, that's extremely, extremely uncommon. Uh, I would say that this, like men, and we have different concerns when it comes to interacting with other genders. So, for example, a woman, yes, there's the physical, threat risk, for sure. For men, I would say, being taken advantage of, like women trying to gold dig, um, women trying to use the guy for what this and that, and then do that to some extent too. And another one, which again, I don't think is super common, but it does happen, is false rape accusations. So those are like, I think that we have different things we got to watch out for. But I do agree that men, we don't have like a physical safety risk in the US or in first world countries when interacting with women. I mean, would you disagree with any part of that?
Yeah, well, false rape accusations seem to be about as frequent as false allegations of any other major crime. So, while it's certainly something that can happen, it's not impossible. I don't think it should be something that really dominates your thoughts when you're talking with women. In terms of like the gold
I agree
digging,
with that.
though, stuff like that, that's more of a like if the friendship doesn't turn out such and such way. I don't think it's really comparable to the implicit threat of physical violence. Like if a woman turns out to be a gold digger or whatever. I mean, okay, but you chose to buy the drinks or this or that. I don't think it's quite the same as being attacked. It's just an unfortunate consequence. You could say the other way. There are tons of guys who pretend to be friends with girls, but it turns out they only want to sleep with them. That's super common. Um, but I wouldn't like if a woman was saying like, well, you need to watch out for this the same way you need to watch out for being like assaulted by them. I'd also think that's kind of an overstatement.
Mm. But you would agree that the vast majority of men um, don't have any kind of malicious intent when interacting with women. Like most men are not predators. Most men are not trying to physically assault women. Like you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, most men. I think the number of men who have malicious intent is very small. I would say that the number of men who beget malicious outcomes, or at least negative outcomes, unknowingly, is a lot higher though than a lot of people are comfortable with. High enough that I mean, a lot of women are familiar with some experience of sexual assault or rape or sexual harassment, and I
Sure.
bet for a lot of them, the guys that did that didn't think they were doing that thing. In fact, that seems to be more common than examples where guys are fully aware of what they were doing. So it's just something to keep in mind. And women will be on guard often with stuff like that, which seems reasonable.
No, I agree. That does seem reasonable. But what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean? Like the guy raped the girl and he wasn't aware of it? Like, how does that happen?
A lot of people don't really know what consent is. A lot of people like they'll fuck someone who's super drunk and they'll think like that's okay. Or they'll have sex with a person under really implicitly coercive circumstances. Like you'll have a chick who's at a guy's place because she drank a lot and she just sort of drunkenly agreed to head over like in a taxi. And then when she sobers up, like she's at this dude's place, he's in control of the house. She doesn't have her car there, so she can't leave without an Uber. She can't find her phone or whatever. And the guy's like hardcore flirting with her. And maybe the guy's just thinking, damn, this is a hot chick in my house. Like I'm going to flirt with her. But maybe the girl's thinking, if I don't fuck this dude, he might hurt me. So she has sex with him. And it's like, oh, it's not like malicious rape, but it's definitely, blurring the lines with consent. It's the
Mhm.
implication. It's like that's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia
Yeah,
meme.
the implication. Yeah. Okay, but you would classify that in the rapey category.
I don't know if there's a hard line to stuff like that. It's at the very least it's bad behavior that can be worked on. In terms of like rape, where to draw that line? Well, when does it be turn into rape as opposed to just like reading the consent lines really badly? I don't know where that line is
Well, I
exactly.
think the
It's
line
definitely something
should.
that shouldn't
Mhm.
happen.
I think the line should be: would should that person go to jail for that? I think that's where we kind of have to like: is this a crime that should be punishable by the law, or is this something that's just ethically dubious?
I think what I just described wouldn't be punishable by the law.
Okay.
um, because the woman would not be impaired chemically at that point, and she would have technically consented. But I think that morally it's still bad. So at that point, I think it's still behavior to be avoided.
Okay. Do you think that should be punishable by the law, or are you okay with it as is?
No, the problem with like rape cases is that it's always going to be really he said, she said. In terms of moving over the definitions, I don't know if there's ever going to be a legal line that like perfectly punishes all the people who deserve it and doesn't punish the people who don't. Where it is right now is probably fine. I don't know if I would really offer a legal critique, more of a
Okay.
social one.
Fair enough. Do you okay? Let me kind of change gears a little bit. Do you have the problem with the idea of like okay? Let me rephrase that differently. Do you think there's an element of game involved with flirting and courtship, meaning like guys are playing a little bit of a game, girls are playing a little bit of a game?
Yeah, I'd say so. Though I hate that game though. I generally try to avoid women who do that. But yeah, I think it happens to an extent.
But do you think some of that is just socially accepted? Like some women, like maybe they don't even want to do it, but they just feel like, oh, if I give in too easy, like the guy's not gonna like me. I have to like flirt with him and maybe be a little sassy.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. I
Mm,
usually try, at least when I'm talking to people who I'm interested in, I usually try to dispel that and be very direct. But the in with regards to the social expectation, like women get slut shamed if they give it up too easy, and guys feel like they have to play into that because otherwise they might get accused of getting creepy. So yeah, that's kind of like a artificial barrier.
But then I don't think you would disagree on that point with the pickup community because that's basically the pickup community would be like, yeah, there's this game and we just basically want to help you play it better. I mean, that's the basic premise. It's not to like create a game when game doesn't exist, right? Like, oh, let's make everything a game. Let's make human interaction a game. I think it's just like, okay, let's acknowledge that there's this social game and just basically help you play it better. So you're not because if you don't know how to play the game at all, and like a chick, for example, is like playfully flirting with you and she's like, oh, stop. And then you just take that, you can't pick up on that. And you're just like, what did I do? Right. She's just going to be turned off. She's like, this guy has like no social intuition. That's like a pretty, just one example.
Though, for what it's worth, I think that any woman who would react that way is probably not worth your time anyway. But yeah, it's mostly about how you play that game, I suppose, because especially when it comes to dating and sex, a lot of people are really, really easy to manipulate. Not just women, like everyone. A lot of people are horny and desperate, right? So there are definitely ways to increase the likelihood of you sleeping with someone, but I
Sure.
think a lot of them involve kind of playing off insecurities in a way which it's not rape or anything, but I do feel like it's not conducive to building a healthy relationship with that person.
Okay. So I think we might have stumbled upon a potential disagreement. So can you give me an example of like how that would be? Like how you could play off a person's insecurity to get them in bed.
Negging, that's the big one, right? That's the practice of playfully insulting a
Mm.
person in order to make them self-critical or self-conscious so that they're more receptive to compliments and more willing to believe that your interest in them is worthwhile.
Yeah, that is a good example. It's not really common in the pickup community nowadays. Like I think the vast majority of PUA channels will like kind of mock the idea of negging. It's something that what came about from Neil Strauss's book, The Game, and I think that book made it seem like it's something that's much more prevalent than it is. Like for example, me personally, I never like teach negging. I just say tease the girl and flirt with her, but don't like actually try to like bring down her value because that's just going to call off cringe. Can you name another example of something like that?
Yeah, negging's one of them. I feel like perceived disinterest is a big one as well. A really big part, at least from the dating advice that I've seen in a lot of communities, is to constantly give the impression that you're not really invested that
Mm,
much in the person or the conversation, because overinvestment can come across as creepy or
sure.
over involved, and you want her to feel like she has to chase you a little bit as well.
Mm. Okay. I mean, but does that really play on her insecurities if you just like don't act like you're super interested?
Um, Not always. It can sometimes. There are a lot of people with abandonment issues, for example, who I know are really, really. I don't want to use the word triggered. I don't know if that's right. They're very receptive, I guess, to the
Mm,
perceived threat of people dipping on them. I feel like in terms of like efficaciousness, like how much this all works. I agree. There are lots of things you can do to kind of work with a person's psyche to make it more likely that you'll get together. But I feel like it even if it maybe you get like laid because of it, I
mm,
feel like it's generally better to be really like just sort of autistically upfront and direct.
mm.
Um, with a lot of people, because even if that will put some of them off, I think that it leads to better outcomes with the people it does work
Mm.
on. And that's nice, and it's more authentic in that case because you don't feel like you have to keep this whole thing juggled to engage with them.
So yeah, so what you're describing is called radical honesty, and there's a lot of proponents of it. I'm not necessarily critical of it. Like I would say that I'm quite honest and upfront, but I wouldn't say I go down that far to the point where I'm radical honesty. So I guess let's get into like some examples. Like for example, if let's say you were on a date with a girl and you were feeling horny and you just want to fuck the shit out of her, like would you actually say that to her or?
Uh, yeah, well, not like as an opener. It's not the first thing that come out of my mouth, but yeah, as a general thing, if you're at a party or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I'm enjoying talking to you, and I think you're hot. I don't know if you feel the same way, but if you are interested, you can do X or Y. Something like that. Obviously, it's highly contextual, but I think it's okay to be direct like that.
Well, what if, like, for example, like you're on a date and the chick is talking, and like what she's talking about is just boring the shit out of you, and like in your mind, you're just thinking, like, pretty much every guy has had this. You're like, you know what? I just want to fuck this girl, and I just don't want to talk to her because her personality is such a turnoff, but she's so hot. Like, would you actually express that to her?
I wouldn't want to fuck somebody I found that boring. But if I wanted to, if that was the goal, I think you could pull the conversation away from that if you wanted to. Yeah, something like, I'm enjoying the conversation with this or that, but there's something that I can't get off my mind and blah blah blah.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't ad lib the entire process right off the cuff, but I think it's okay to do something like that. I would never say, like, if you're talking to somebody on a date or whatever, they're boring you, like, anything to stop that, I think works just fine. I have no patience for boring conversations. I don't think anyone should have to put up with that for pussy.
Mm.
Um, yeah, because it's tedious, and I think it makes you think less of the whole process in general. Like, well, this is what I
Mm.
have to put up with to get laid. I have to deal with women, something like that.
I mean, it sounds like basically you're saying you would express yourself in a socially calibrated way. That's kind of like the feeling I'm getting, which I think is fine. I think that there's advantages and disadvantages to that strategy. I think that the advantage is that the girls that you hit it off with, like you're gonna hit it off with more. Like meaning like you're by being polarizing, you're screening out a lot of people, but the people you do match with, it's gonna be like because you guys are exactly in line. The downside to the strategy is that you're screening out a lot of girls in the middle. So meaning girls who you might really vibe with once you got to know them better, but initially they just get turned off by you being a little too honest in that moment, right? Because we people don't generally speaking don't even open up like that much right away. Like it takes time for most people to open up and feel out their personality, right? So you could potentially screen away someone who might be a good fit for you, because you didn't really want to play the game. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I understand you're leaving people on the table, so to speak, when you do things that way. I'm only talking about my personal preferences.
Oh, okay, okay.
With regards to how people handle these situations in general, I do feel like the gamification of flirting can lead to some negative outcomes. I think everyone's going to have different strategies for flirting, which is fine. I would only ask that people not do anything like deliberately try to manipulate people's sense of self-worth. As long as everyone's doing it above board, playing the game in a lighthearted, not
Mm,
overly involved way, I think that's okay. Any
mm.
kind of social interaction is to an extent reciprocal and not adversarial, dialectic, where you both play off each other,
Mm.
and there's nothing wrong with learning to do that better.
Okay, so you don't actually have a problem with like the aspect of the game. You just don't want like dark triad type of tactics. That's what you don't like, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not principally opposed
Okay.
to the concept of dating advice, though I will say the majority of people on YouTube or whatever who I've seen talk about dating advice, not you, I haven't seen like
Mm.
through your content something that made me upset, but oftentimes I see stuff that basically boils down to like very traditional attitudes, like almost evo psych attitudes towards men and women. Like, women biologically want this and men biologically want that. In order to get what you need from them, you need to trick them into like that kind of thing, and that I dislike.
Mm. Do any names like stick out to you? Like, is there any videos you could reference where you kind of like saw that, or like they were talking about tricking chicks and whatnot?
Fuck. There's a like, this just happened like a week ago. There's a
Mhm.
YouTube channel called Think Before You Sleep.
Oh, I saw
Headed
your reaction video to that.
Yeah, headed by a person I'm not a tremendous fan of politically. But he was going over dating coaches who he was critiquing
Mhm.
because, and those dating coaches he were critiquing, I think they were actually quite bad. Um, but his criticisms of them were also kind of bad. So it's everyone loses really. Um, yes, stuff like that. I don't know how much the scene has really evolved. I remember the Red Pill subreddit like 7 years ago, and that place was really bad. I mostly just want dudes to be happy, really. I just know that sometimes they get so caught up in the idea that one neat trick will save their social life that they just kind of bounce between it like fad diets and nothing really works.
No, I agree with you on that. That makes sense. I do think that there's some really dumb shit in the pickup and Red Pill community that I've actually personally been really critical of myself. So, but yeah, I do agree with you on that. I think dudes do tend to like look for. They think that there's like a one liner that they could use and that will get them the girls. I think the marketing aspect of the pickup industry definitely doesn't help because, like, if you want to have a very persuasive sales page, you can say, hey, buy my product and go out there and talk to girls and you might get, better results and blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, we're going to teach you this one magic line. You're going to get 99% of chicks you talk to, right? So that kind of creates that impression.
Stuff like that, yeah.
I think that problem exists in a lot of industries, like fitness industry, for example. So I wouldn't say it's just specific to the pickup industry, but okay, I take your point.
No, I agree. I think it's specific to any industry that teaches you how to be the gender that you identify as. Anything like diet advice, look like this, workout, get a manly body like this, dating so you can act like a proper guy in social situations. Anything that plays on people's insecurity that they're not a right woman or right man. I think people get super vulnerable to really bad advertising in those fields specifically.
But don't you think it happens with like industries when it comes to like financial advice and making money? Like, oh, take our sales course and you're gonna 100x your business when it's like largely nonsense. Like I see it
Yeah,
a lot in that industry too.
to an extent, yeah, I think so. I think there might be a different niche group there that gets affected. I think it's caused by a sense of like anxiety. Middle class people, I think, often go for that sort of thing, and lower class people tend to go for like lottery or like gambling schemes to make wealth quickly. I think the position you're in life really determines what kind of shit you fall for. And
Mhm.
I feel like men and women who are kind of like not fully secure with their role gravitate towards those things. But I would agree. It's the same basic logic when you have like these get rich quick schemes where you're just trying to play off somebody's like immediate desperate feeling that they're not living life the right way.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that. Okay, let me then move on to other things. What are some other things that you would disagree with the red pill or pickup community on?
Oh god. Well, I think the Evo psych is a big part of it. I feel like
What
there's a
is that?
really
I've never heard that term before. What is even?
evolutionary psychology. It's like
Okay.
in
Uh-huh.
this context, like the idea that there are like these really big, strong, fundamental differences between men and women. And I think like obviously there are some. You can see at least a few. But in terms of like how to date or like pick people up or whatever, I think in terms of how people form friendships, it's like basically the same. Socially, we're instructed to treat flirting differently. That's a big one. But in terms of like the fundamentals, like biologically, what do we respond to? I think people just like friendly dudes. I just think people want to have a good friendship, and people like fucking, and it's pretty simple all around.
Okay. What can you like pinpoint some specific ones that you've heard? Like in yes, I'll say Evo Psych. My first time using that term. Community, like some specific differences that you think aren't actually true, that you think are BS.
Well, I would say that the idea that women fundamentally need a man to protect them, or that they have a biological drive to seek out something like that, I think that gets heavily overstated. There's a social pressure there, I admit, but I think the biological element there gets massively overstated. Um, I
Mm,
think you've stuff like that. It's another is the gatekeepers of sex. Socially, women are definitely the gatekeepers of sex, but that's a modern historical thing. That wasn't the case in every society throughout all time. I don't think that, like, on a fundamental level, women are any more averse to just fucking around for fun than men are. It's basically just what we're taught. And the idea that it's inherent or biological, I think, contributes to this feeling of alienation from women that sometimes makes people act a little weird with them a little bit.
Okay, well let's get into that one. So okay, so you don't think there's like there's a biological reason, like you don't think there's any biological reason basically for women to be gatekeepers of sex, to be like as to be more averse to sex than men.
Um, I think it's possible to form biological explanations for the reality that we live in today.
Mm,
But I think that anthropologically and historically, evidence for the idea that women have always been like really averse to sleeping around is kind of sparse. Monogamy is a social construct, after all, that kind of was cemented after the
Yeah, I
foundation.
agree with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, like, honest, if you go back like far enough in tribal society, I'm pretty sure that it was like a lot of the guys are just railing a lot of the girls, and a lot of the girls are getting railed by multiple guys, and just like whoever has the kid, like just the kids pop out. Nobody knows who the dad is. They raise the kid as a tribe, just very free flowing like that. I think in a lot of cases, and biologically we're the same now as we were then. I think that everything built up on top of that is a kind of social framework which we have to take into consideration, but it's important to know that it's not like a foundational thing.
Okay, I would almost claim the opposite actually, because if you look at it from a biological perspective, the cost of sex for men and women is largely different. So for a dude, we have sex, we shoot our load, and that's basically it, right? If we want to be assholes, like we don't have to raise the kid, or if there was no society, we could just get away with it. For women, again, pre-contraception, which is not a thing up until recently, before birth control and whatnot, there's a big cost of sex. That was 9 months of carrying a child, and then another 18 years or whatever, maybe 14 years of raising the child, right? So if a chick wants to just fuck around, right, that's biologically, not in her benefit. Like, again, the birth control has changed the game largely. Like, now there is no real cause to women to, have a lot of sex. But I think from a biological perspective, like there was for a very, very long period of time. I mean, would you disagree with that?
Well, once you're pregnant, right? I mean, once you've had sex once as a woman, in a tribal sense, if we're going back to our biological roots, anything you do from that point forward is just for funsies, I suppose, in a purely biological sense. I think women were getting pregnant pretty much all the time, especially back then. Because children died all the time, so you kind of had to replace them quickly. And yeah, it seems like you talk about like an 18-year obligation to raise children, but back then they would have raised them communally as well, which would have lessened the individual burden. I agree that in a purely biological sense, there is a greater risk, cost to women having sex, because they actually get pregnant or whatever. But in terms of the way in which that's manifested socially, I don't know, especially today with contraception. I think absent social pressures, people will be fucking around pretty evenly, and they do seem to. I mean, it's not like women don't get around, right?
Yeah, well, let me just quickly address this in the comments, because I think people are misinterpreting my position. Dude, I get it. I know women love sex. I'm not saying women don't love sex, and I'm certainly not suggesting that women should be not engaging in all the sex they want to do. I'm simply arguing from a biological perspective. For a long time, they didn't have that luxury, which they do now, which is great that they do. That's one of the good things about modern technology. Um, okay, I mean, okay, I mean,
This is totally like unsettled anthropological stuff. You know what I mean? The only point of, like, I just don't like people hampering on the idea that it's like a fundamental divide. At most, through contraception, we've sort of arrived at a point where we can engage pretty freely, and I think that's nice.
we have, yeah, and I do agree that's very nice. But you still, to this day, have women, generally speaking, being the gatekeepers of sex. Even if we go to like more liberal societies like Scandinavia and stuff like that, where there's like very little slut shaming, or that have pretty like open attitudes towards sexuality. Even in those places, like women are still the gatekeepers of sex.
Yeah, I wonder how much that can be alleviated given enough time. There have been historical examples of societies in which, I think in ancient Greece, depending on the city state, women were considered to be the lecherous and sexually aggressive ones.
Really?
Yeah, I think there's some conflicting. Anytime you go back far enough, there's going to be a variety of historical accounts. But I think if we did truly get rid of the social obligations in either direction, um, I wonder if I wonder what that would bring about in terms of like biological parity for people's interest in sex. In terms of how much sex is had, it seems like there's a decent level of parity. In terms of who initiates it or who's expected to initiate it, even in Scandinavia, I'm pretty sure it's socially expected that men still do like the courting. I wonder if given enough time that would kind of fade away. I'm not sure. We'd have to see with time.
You'd be surprised. I actually spent some time in Scandinavia. The common complaint that Scandinavian women have is that they have to do all the work. That the men are like just like super like soy boys or whatever. So they have to be the one that makes the move on a guy.
Yeah,
So,
not so fun, is it? Huh? Yeah, now you get to suffer. See, now they know. That's equality, feminism.
but the point is that women in those countries, like they still, I don't know, like I just don't know how much you could even like even if we remove all the social stigma, which I think like in Scandinavian countries is like largely gone. Like I just never seen any example of like slut shaming or like religion or conservative attitudes in those countries. Like they're super open. Like like for example, if you're on Tinder in Finland, like you can just be very upfront. You can be like, hey, what are you looking for on here? And the girl will be like, oh, just have some fun. You can be like, oh, cool, me too. And if you do that in like Latin America or like East Asia, no one's going to answer that question honestly. So like the attitudes there, I would say are like pretty much like as open as you want, but you're still in those places you have, women being the gatekeepers. And I just wonder how much of that is actually the fact that men, we just have this strategy of like, let's just fuck everything. And I agree. Like sometimes we get to a point, like I've gotten past that point where I'm like, okay, I want to have like a relationship and whatnot. I do have one now, but, for a while, it's like men are like, yeah, I just want to, fuck as much as possible. Versus women are more like, yeah, I want to have fun, but I don't want to fuck a lot of dudes. I just want to fuck one or two right dudes, right? So men are more quantity and women are more quality. Not all the time. It's not an extreme thing, but like generally speaking, that's what I found.
Oh, a lot of it is definitely based on what people perceive to be like a desirable outcome, right? For basically everywhere in the world, not everywhere, but in many places at least, a guy who fucks a lot of women is considered very socially successful. Like,
Right.
this was the case even back in like the like 200 years ago, like maybe you'd be called a scoundrel for it, but there's always been a kind of bias towards sexual proclivity
Right.
with men, whereas with women, that's certainly not the case. Even right now, nobody really celebrates a woman who fucks a bunch of guys because it's considered really easy, which, to be fair, hell of a lot easier than fucking a bunch of girls as a guy. So it is easier. There's no longer that like accolade for being a successful, sexual magnate. It's just like, oh, you're easy. Even in very socially progressive countries, this remains the case, at least to an extent. Even in progressive communities, if a guy is very sexually successful, it's something that tends to be celebrated. And if a woman is, it's like accepted or tolerated because we're not going to slut shame you, but it's not cool the way it is
Mm.
when men do it. So a lot of this probably comes down to what people idealize, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of the reason guys sleep around with so many women is because they've told themselves that that's part of what it means to be a guy. But you have so many of these guys later, they're like, well, these fucks didn't mean anything to me. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe you were just kind of doing that because you thought you had to. There are so many conflating factors here. It's really difficult to form any hard answers.
I mean, yeah, you're right, but it's definitely like a man who's promiscuous is largely treated differently. But I think that there is a good reason for that. It would be like the same reason why someone who has a big trust fund and they has $10 million, like no one's impressed with that, but someone who like worked their way up from the slums and they have $10 million, it's very impressive. Because for a man, to be super promiscuous, they either have to be famous or they need to have like really good social skills and be good with women. Like you can't be like a fat, lazy slob who's socially awkward and have a high lake count. That just doesn't happen unless of course you're famous, like you're Jonah Hill or something. For women, like it takes no skill to have a high body count. Like literally all a girl would have to do is go on Tinder, put up her photos, even if she's unattractive, and say, hey, I'm DTF, and she can have like 5 dudes at her door. Like we actually did an experiment. I don't know if you saw it on my channel. We took the photos of like frankly an obese girl, right? Like I think 99.9% of guys would find her very unattractive. Created a profile that was like, hey, I want to meet up with a guy, blah, blah, blah. Not even overly explicit. Within 24 hours, she had 500 matches. Dozens of guys were saying, hey, can I come over? Let's hang
Damn,
out.
queen.
Yeah. So like for her, she could have gone like 10 dicks like in that one night with like, it would take no skill on her part at all. All she has to do really is just like follow through on basic text. Right. So I do think that there is like a reason. It's just like not that impressive. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a woman being sexually promiscuous and hooking up with a lot of guys. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just not an accomplishment. Versus for men, it is in some ways an accomplishment. I think it can be too much of an meaning. Like I think you don't want to like derive your self esteem from the number of girls you sleep with. That's kind of weird. But like if a guy's like, yeah, I've been with 500 girls, you're like, okay, what is this guy doing? Like he must have some kind of skill component to it.
I think there are. I'm not too impressed with flat body counts because there are a lot of things that can skew the numbers. First of all, it is undeniable that if you're a woman, it's easier to get laid off of Tinder or whatever. Now, I'm not just into women, I'm pan. So my with gay men on the table, 500 body count is a by the end of the afternoon type thing. Okay, these queers are insane. So
Yeah, I
my
agree with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
my perception is skewed a little bit in the communities that I'm in. I will say though,
But wouldn't that actually give you a really good perspective because you know what guys are like, you know what girls are like, right?
honestly, the only impression that it's really given me, I genuinely do not think it's a difference in how horny or how willing they are. I think the main difference is that gay men aren't as afraid of men, genuinely. Because in terms of like, so in terms of like perceived threat, I'm a pretty large guy. I'm a perceived threat to basically anyone. And if they're bottoming, then even more so. I mean, God knows what you could get away with when you're in that position. But the but with a lot of gay men, like they don't have this ingrained fear of men. A lot of women do. And a lot of that's because, they've heard their entire life stories of female relatives or friends who have been abused or assaulted. And I think that there's like a trust barrier that they need to overcome in ways that men don't. The first time I ever like talked with a guy off Tinder, this is in early college, because before it was just in person stuff with the guys. Um, they told me, you can come on by later tonight. We're having a party. I'll be like in this bedroom. Like, here's the house number. Like, here's the address. What the fuck are you doing? I hadn't even shown this guy my dick yet, and he's already given me his goddamn address, bedroom location, off the front door, unafraid. And I think that fear is a big thing. I wonder if maybe given enough time, if things level out a bit, maybe that fear barrier will lessen, and you'll have women who are like way more aggressive about this because they don't have that fear. They'll act like gay bottoms.
I mean, I
Maybe.
feel, I do think it's a factor. I won't deny that. I do think that fear is a factor. Like sometimes maybe a woman's horny, but then she's like, oh, if I meet up a random guy, uh, there's a risk. And I do think quite often women overblow the risk. Like I think the risk, like statistically speaking, is really small, especially if you take certain precautions. But there is a risk. And a woman is within her rights to be concerned. There's nothing wrong with that. I do agree that there's also a social aspect to it, with slut shaming and whatnot. More so in some countries, less so in other countries. But in my opinion, I think the biggest factor is just simply has to do with the fact that men quite often are just like, yeah, like I want to fuck like a lot of different, I want to have a lot of different partners, right? Like, I want to fuck like, a girl today, I want to fuck a new girl tomorrow. And I think girls on average are much more likely to get attached when they have sex than men. Some men do too. And some women can have sex without pair bonding. But more generally speaking, women on average don't want to fuck a bunch of dudes. They want to more like have one, maybe two dudes, maybe three dudes that they're fucking, but they have more of a connection with those guys rather than just go out and just have a bunch of meaningless sex. So, like in my opinion, the biggest difference is just comes down to our basically dating and sex strategies and like what we want. Because like I'll give an example. I don't know if you're familiar with like the BDSM community, right? But if you go to like a swingers club or a swingers party, it's a very safe environment. Like there's like it's the safest environment ever. There's a bunch of security. Like consent is like a huge thing there, right? You can't even like touch someone without asking for permission. It's not like a sexual free for all, which some people think it is. But even in those environments, like when a girl goes there, she might have sex with like I don't know, like two or three guys or something, right? But a guy who goes there, he'll have sex with like, he'll just engage in gangbangs with all the chicks. So like the guys there are just still having way more sex with way more partners than chicks are. Like I
I
personally
think
do that myself.
I don't generally I know there are some women who will just get railed like 7 ways till sundown by
Yeah,
80,000
there are
dudes.
there are those. Yeah,
God bless them. I think one of the big differences is actually down to the quality of sex, right? So if we're talking all like straight cis people or whatever, I can hook up with anyone. I'll always come. Because I'm the guy, I have a
right.
dick, right? Like, if I just hook up with just some random chick, I will come. She might not, especially not. Well, I try, I do my best. But if she's just like railing 50 dudes or whatever, like she's not going to come from a lot of those interactions. And I feel like
Right,
just do kind of the physiology of a pussy in
right.
comparison. Maybe the quality versus quantity thing is because guys have a virtual guarantee they're going to nut when they fuck around, but chicks will be looking for people who can actually like effectively satisfy them. And that might
Yeah.
disincentivize because to them, like, oh, I might fuck a new guy this night, but like, will I get the nut from that? Or will he come in 4 minutes and then leave? Like, I don't fucking know. So
No,
maybe
that's
there's like a
definitely
cost
true.
benefit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's definitely true. That's a good point. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think also like for most women, in order to have an orgasm, they need a good amount of comfort, and for some women, a good amount of women, they also need a bit of connection. Like for example, for me, right, if there's a hot chick on my bed, we can literally talk zero. Like we don't even have to communicate at all. I can still have like come, like right, if I fuck her, right. But for most chicks, that wouldn't really be possible. Like some random dude shows up in their bed with their dick out, even if that guy's like super attractive. Like most of the time, they won't be able to come. Like they need like that kind of connection and comfort. Yeah, some girls can, but
Like
most
40 minutes in cowgirl, and then it's like rub on the clit in this exact way for 5 minutes, and then do this exact holding pattern for
right.
8 until like right, yeah, it's the whole thing.
Well, women are definitely more complicated when it comes to sex.
It's yeah, they make it hard a little bit. I think it's I wonder a lot of that, maybe maybe a little bit, probably some of that is social, like the comfort thing, but some of that's definitely just hard, like full on, like the difference in testosterone versus estrogen, or like dicks versus vaginas or whatever. Yeah, I think stuff like that's important to keep in mind as well. You know.
But wouldn't that kind of go back to the point that like that is a biological difference between men and women that does affect our sexual behavior, right?
Yeah, though in variant sense, trans women who still have dicks, the same thing happens with them. So in that case, it's not even a penis thing necessarily. It's like an estrogen thing, which causes the way in which you have an orgasm to be different, or like the whole business with prostate orgasms. This is actually the case with some gay bottoms as well, where I'm trying to think of a more like progressive way of saying this than they basically turn into a woman during sex, but I don't really know how to. Like they don't do anything with their dick. Like it's all ass. It's the same. It's the same basic thing. I'm sorry, but I think there is like a big social like tint to it. Like if you have people who, in an endocrinological, biological sense, are basically the same, like myself and a cis gay bottom, but we participate in sex in radically different ways in terms of how we nut and like the ways in which we go about. That's interesting. I don't know how much of that is social or like individual variance, but it's definitely like an interesting uh range of behavior.
Well, let me ask a question like this. We both agree that there's a social element to and there's a biological element, it sounds like. What I think we might be disagreeing on is the extent. So, like, roughly speaking, like, what's a ballpark percentage to which you would say it's social and what you would say is biological?
I don't know. I don't know if I could commit to a percentage, but I would say that
Like a
in terms,
ballpark or something like that.
I will say definitively that I think that biological differences, interpersonally between the sexes, whatever, make a significant. They're significantly present when it comes to dating and
Sexual
flirting with
attraction.
people. Yeah, it's definitely like a heavy influence. I think a lot of it is social, more than people are willing to give credit for, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of the biological stuff is um present in elements that can be bridged over with like proper social etiquette, in the sense that even if it's different, it can functionally be the same if you know how to handle it and if there aren't any weird social barriers.
Okay. What do you think are some things like let's say you're playing God and you can design a society like what would you do different than like let's say Finland or Sweden or Norway or Denmark to make whatever sexual strategies more even between men and women? Like let's say you have full control of the society.
My answer is probably a little bit more radical than a lot of people would go, but I'm a gender abolitionist. So destroying the concept of men and women like as a functional social category, I think it'd be really interesting to see how the social categorizations play out after that. But that would probably be my prescription.
Just what does that mean specifically?
Um, Basically, if you recognize gender and sex as two different concepts, and sex is obviously there, you've got people who grow facial hair and who don't, whatever. But acknowledging those categories, the idea of gender being like the collection of social roles built up on top of those, I guess the goal would be like if a person is born, the sex that they're born into is just that. It's like, well, what do you have? Okay, well, these are your bits, right? But in terms of your role, there's not really any functional difference between those two. No color differences, job expectations, social roles to fill. And that way, when people are old enough to really feel out their own personalities, they could make their own decisions about what social cliques and groups they want to be a part of.
What would you do about the fact that men and women largely gravitate towards different careers?
Well, I think a ton of that is social, and provably so. You have examples of gender disparities changing after, like, the X Files, the Scully effect, where a bunch of women went into police work and investigations. And you had the fact that computer science was basically 50-50 men, women, up until computers began to be marketed as a boys' toy. And then when those kids who grew up with those toys got into computer science, it became a very male-dominated field. A lot of it is social. A lot of it isn't. Construction, that's going to be a male game, I think, for pretty much forever. With our big beefy back muscles and shoulders, maybe people gravitate a little bit more in that way, but we already have that difference right now, because right now, without any clear gender delineation, tall people are more likely to get into some fields than other fields, but we don't feel the need to separate them into a different gender category, more likely maybe to play baseball or certain types of physical tasks, but we can do that without making like these roles for them, like, oh, you're a tall, that means that you're this and that and so on.
I mean, I don't think anyone should be prohibited from doing what they want, but right now we don't have that. Like a woman can, there's nothing stopping a woman from being a plumber or a mechanic or something like that. Like she can easily do those careers, but most women choose not to. And of course, there are exceptions to every rule. And same thing, there's like male nurses and stuff like that. But generally speaking, women gravitate towards certain fields and then gravitate towards certain fields, right? Like you wouldn't say there's a big obstacle to women becoming a plumber like that or something, but there's like 99% of the plumbers are male. They're dudes.
There's not a legal obstacle. I think there's a strong social obstacle because plumbing is seen as a masculine profession. When people think of the professions that are open to them, they don't think of what they're biologically capable of doing. They think of what they ought do, or more likely, what they're interested in doing. Like being an airline steward or stewardess, right? The common historical justification for why all airline assistants were women was because their smaller bodies helped them fit in between the aisle seating. But of course, that's not really true. There are plenty of small men who could fit in there just fine. And now it's starting to reach parity more. But for decades, that was seen as a woman's job, stewardess. Same with elementary school teachers, which was for the longest time basically exclusively a women's job. And it's been reaching parity recently as well. A lot of what we do and want to do is heavily affected by what roles we're taught are acceptable for the groups of people we belong in, even if there are no legal barriers. And I think that's a kind of implicit coercion that I'd like to see gotten away with, or done away with.
I mean, I think there are. Yes, I do think social, social implications play roles. I'm not going to deny that. I think we probably heavily disagree on how much of a role they play. Okay, let me kind of go to this question. Would you say like men's brains in a lot of ways work differently? Like, for example, there was a study that came out that women's brains have like 10 times the gray matter of men's brains, right? Which is responsible for like social type of things and empathy and whatnot. So there are like, you have to grant that there are some differences in the way our brains, generally speaking, work between the genders. Like it's not dicks and pussies.
If only it was. No, there are absolutely some differences. I would have to look at the gray matter study specifically. In terms of the biologically ingrained differences, there are definitely some. I don't think they're that significant in the modern world. The modern world, I mean, most of our behavior comes down to decision making and social engagement. And I think in that respect, we're all pretty equally capable. I would need to see the gray matter thing specifically, but I can look that up after we're done talking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's take something as simple as construction. Like men have a giant advantage when it comes to construction because they can lift more weights. Men on average are a lot stronger, and all that. Like I still like you can get away with every possible gender role. Like men are going to have a huge advantage when it comes to women in construction, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you were to say like males and females or whatever, though. I just don't think it's necessary to ascribe the broader social category because we have a lot of rules for men and women that really have nothing to do with actual biological differences. Dresses and suits, for example. There's no reason why women wear dresses and men wear suits. We've just kind of that's just sort of the expectation we have, pink and blue. It used to be the reverse, back in the 1910s, I believe, pink was actually considered the masculine color because bold and virile, and blue, the passive color, was considered feminine until a toy company in, I believe, Manhattan ran out of light blue paint for boys' toys for girls' toys and decided to use pink paint instead. And after that, the trend shifted. There are a lot of these weird situations, and this is the issue I have with EvoPsych, where we post hoc justify differences between men and women in a biological sense, when in reality, we're just really complicated animals, and there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted when it's totally socially constructed.
Um, I mean, again, I think there are things that are socially constructed. Okay, how about I guess let me ask the question like this: What is the downside to having some sexual polarity? Like, meaning having different, like for example, the example you gave with the suits and women wearing dresses. Like, I don't see it as a bad thing that we dress differently in the sexes. There's nothing that prevents a woman from wearing a suit if she wants to, right? Like, she can do that. It's not against the law, and it shouldn't be, right? But I mean, I don't see it as a bad thing that we dress differently. And frankly, I think it would be a little weird if we all dressed the same. Like, if if men and women dress exactly the same, like, you don't think that would be kind of bizarre?
Well, tall women and short women dress the same, don't they? Don't you find that a little bizarre?
Tall and
Because
short women?
we're only separating by arbitrary categories. I don't want everyone to dress the same. I want people to dress in ways they feel most comfortable. But if you open that up to everyone, I don't think it would suddenly be like everyone would wear the same outfit. I think you would just have different divisions that aren't based on a pre-existing biological construct. See, for me, it's just an extension of my anarchist principles. I'm just in favor of radical freedom. If people are going to have preferences for self-expression, I want it to be determined by categories they put themselves in. But gender is tied to sex, and we're born into our sex. So outside of transitioning, that's something that we have foisted on us. I like masculine things generally. I don't wear dresses, but in a world where I wasn't told for my entire life that men wear suits and not dresses, I have no idea what I actually would like as a pure representation of my personal expression. I have no way of knowing.
Yeah, you're right. There's no way of knowing that. Yeah, I mean, I guess there really is no way to know that. I mean, I doubt that you naturally. Well, actually, yeah, okay. There's no way to really determine that. I mean, I think there's really no way to even get there though. Like, to make it like you social programming exists, whether we like it or not. Um, I guess, like, I just don't see the big benefit in pushing for having a genderless society. Like, I agree there should be reasons to remove like gender barriers, like like if there was a law that said women can't do this or that, and there are in some countries, I'm like, yeah, we should remove that. I'm fully in favor of that. Um, but pushing people to be like gender neutral, I don't know. I just don't see like how that benefits society. Like, I
I don't
think
want
the
to push
sexual
anyone.
polarity. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say I don't want to push anyone. Not to come across a hypocrite. I enjoy my masculine predilections when I have them. And I wouldn't say like, oh, well, you should all be gender neutral. Because it's socially beneficial. I think it's a long term goal. Right now, we're closer to that goal than we were 100 years ago, when like every guy going outside had like a top hat and a 3-piece suit. And women covered their ankles. We've limited the boundaries somewhat. So for me, it's just a long term goal thing. I think people should live and express themselves however they're most comfortable. If I had a kid and they were like assigned male at birth, I would probably like go by he, him and just say, like, you can like whatever you want. Most people are going to call you a boy. So until told otherwise, I'll do the same.
Okay. I mean, let me bring up this point then. One key category where there does need to be differentiation for the sake of fairness is sports, right? So, for example, you take a dude, like, let's take tennis players, right? You take a tennis player who's like ranked 300, he plays Vanessa Williams, he will win, right? That's a match that's happened. So it'd be extremely unfair to put men in women's categories, even if the weight is the same. That would just be like insanely unfair to women, right? So that's like a category, for example, where we do need to differentiate by gender. Like, how would you get around that?
Well, unfairness is the point of sports to an extent, because the people at the top of any field are going to be biologically superior at that sport to people beneath them, right? Like in terms of fairness, if you went into like the whole like rankings for gymnastics or whatever, the people who perform at the top of the Olympic level are literally physically built differently than the people who perform towards the lower ends. That's not to say that there isn't a reason we separate it based on sex. I This is one of those situations where it's like a lesser of five evils type thing. Obviously, you're asking about transports. I do acknowledge that the separation of men and women into different athletic categories is generally beneficial, because if you didn't do
Okay.
that, men would be at the top of everyone,
There
or at
would be
least
no such thing as a successful female athlete.
it would be like maybe like some category, maybe gymnast.
Yeah,
I'm not
like,
even
yeah, some things, yeah, like
something, but like
ballet or something like
90,
that. Yeah,
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 98%, yeah,
yeah.
would be guys up there. With the trans sports stuff in particular, there's a lot of really interesting sports research on the effect that medical transition has on your body. Because of course a trans woman isn't the same as a man physically after they've been taking hormones. It destroys your muscles, it tears your body apart. It turns you into something worse than anyone could ever imagine. A woman. It
Wait,
definitely
sorry,
has an
say it
effect.
again. I kind of missed the very last part. It does what?
Oh, I was teasing with the end there. I was making a joke. I was making a misogynistic joke. But
Oh,
the hormones definitely have a real effect. Right now, we don't really have an epidemic of trans women dominating women's events like at the Olympics or at the highest level. It's usually like every 6 months there's a big story at like the college level. And
mhm.
I think they're worth looking at because, yeah, trans women do have some advantages over cis women on a probabilistic level. My main issue is like, how do we handle it moving forward? And usually, for my answer, I just say, I wish it would be depoliticized and thoroughly investigated by sports medical researchers because they're the only people who can really answer these questions. And until then, we should take like a light hand touch because it's like a very low stakes social issue, I think.
I agree with you that it's a low stakes social issue, and I agree that it's something that's heavily politicized. I grant you both those points. But I mean, I think it's a little unfair to say that they have some advantage because, like, especially if we talk about combat sports, like, it's just a straight, like a whatever cis woman. She will get destroyed by like a woman who used to be a trans woman, right? It's just like that. The trans woman has 25, 30 years of testosterone in her system and just largely bigger bones and muscles, in her favor compared to the, whatever the standard woman. It's just like such not a fair fight. And then furthermore, it creates a safety issue because that woman can just like literally fucking destroy that woman, right?
Yeah, the androgen sensitivity that you benefit from when you're a guy, and then you transition later, there are definitely lasting effects in that respect. In terms of how to effectively deal with that, it's such like a technical issue. I'm not a big sports guy as well, so I'm not
Yeah,
totally
I'm not either.
versed on the
Yeah.
the rulings there. In terms of like safety issues, I would say like UFC and stuff are going to be a safety issue no matter how you're handling it. I know that famous trans UFC fighter was up against a cis woman who is larger than her. So, depending on how the weight categories go, it's possible that the relative bone density of a trans woman might mean they get placed against women who have a longer reach because they would have the lighter bones of a cis woman. Yeah, I don't know. It's really it's really complicated. I don't have a really strong position. If it stays depoliticized, which it hasn't, ideally if it was depoliticized and it was being handled by like the researchers in that field, that would make me happiest. And whatever answers they came up with, I guess we could, try to work with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that it could be depoliticized is impossible because that will just never happen because everything gets
Yeah.
politicized, unfortunately. Um, but I think like the goal of sports is to be as fair as possible to the most amount of people, right? So that's, for example, they don't have people who weigh 150 pounds fight someone who weighs 250 pounds. It's just like extremely unfair to people who weigh less. And you can never be fair to everyone, right? There's no way to do it. You can't have like, for example, a league for 155 pounds, 156 pounds, 157 pounds, right? There has to be some reasonable accommodations made in the interest of, let's just say the sport. Um, so like there's only so much you could do, but if you take trans women and allow them to compete openly against like cis women, especially in combat sports, that's pretty much the end of cis women, right? So basically you're benefiting a small percentage of people, but you're being unfair to a huge amount of women. So like with the goal of being as fair to as many people as possible, you have to have a different league. There has to be some separation there. In the same way that you separate men and women, or in the same way you separate someone that weighs 150 to 250 pounds. And again, like that's not to say I'm like transphobic or something, have anything against trans women. No, it's just simply in the interest of fairness. Like you want to be fair to the athletes.
No, I agree. Fairness is important. I don't think we're seeing examples of runaway performance from trans women yet. I mean, we do know that there's a risk of overperformance, but in terms of how they've statistically borne out, when you have male athletes transitioning and then have female athletes after like a year or two of hormones, the proportion isn't so significant, I think, that it warrants the level of concern that's been afforded to it. I think I'm more interested, I think, in seeing how this discourse evolves with early transitioners, because while you do benefit from androgen sensitivity if you transition after you've experienced a male puberty, that's not the case if you took hormone blockers and then transitioned without having ever experienced a male puberty. So it's possible that eventually trans women are literally, like, biologically going to be completely on par with cis women, or worse, because they're getting so much estrogen in their bodies. But it'll just take time to find out, I think so, and we'll just have to see where it goes. I don't think we can make a separate category for them because there are so few like trans athletes. Like there's like 4 in the state of Utah, maybe like a handful in California. It's not that much, right? So
It's not that much, and it'll never be as popular as like regular sports. But we do this with, like, for example, the Special Olympics and people who have disabilities. There's not that many disabled athletes, but we still like don't ask people in wheelchairs to compete against like basketball players who can walk. Right? There's no way someone in a wheelchair could do, and that's an extreme example.
that's for
But
their benefit, though, right? I mean, that would be like a self segregation, whereas trans people want to perform in the divisions that they're choosing for. I don't
well,
think a person with a
but
wheelchair would want to play basketball against a person who can walk.
Right, but that inherently makes sense because the person in the wheelchair, he would, get annihilated by someone who can walk, no matter how good he is at shooting or doing free throws, versus the trans person has an advantage, biological against a woman who's cis, right? So it makes sense why one category would not want that, and one category would want that. Like humans are inherently pretty selfish, and we want to do what's best for us. So I wouldn't expect trans women to be like, oh, like please keep us separate, right? Like why would they? Like they're athletes, they
Let,
want to win.
let me ask you then, because I'm curious.
Mhm.
In terms of now I'm going to simplify this a bit because it's obviously so complicated. But let's say that trans women are, on average, let's say 5 to 10 more effective at whatever sports field they're in than cis women are of the
Five
same
ten
bracket.
x or 5-10%.
5-10%, because
Okay.
right now the evidence we have is minor and spurious. So to say they're massively outperforming just doesn't, it's not justified by the evidence we have. Now 5 to 10% ain't nothing, how big a percentage would there have to be before you would say like, oh, this is acceptable? I think trans women should be able to compete alongside cis women, because I think black sprinters outperform white sprinters by a statistically significant amount. But you would never say like we should have a white sprinters category, because otherwise we'll never have like a white sprinter win at the Olympics.
Yeah, I see your point. Um, well, first of all, I would heavily disagree that it's only 5-10%. Like, for example, I agree. There's not hasn't been too much like studies done, but have been a lot of anecdotal stuff. Like there was this one female MMA fighter, trans MMA fighter who fought against a bunch of women, and she was like before she transitioned, she was into MMA, and she was like a fairly average fighter at best. Like she wasn't good, and then she just started like destroying like some of the top women in the sport. Eventually, there was one cis woman that beat her, but she was like, because this cis woman was like so fucking good, but she was just like destroying all these like women who are ranked like much better than her. And I think there's been countless examples like that. In terms of what actual percentage, it would be really hard for me to pinpoint. Again, I'm also not a big sports guy. If it was only truly like 5-10%, which I really don't believe it is, I would say that's not that significant. Like let them compete together. If it was like truly 5-10%. But I don't think it's 5-10%. I think it's like way more than that. I think it's more than 25%. I think it's a huge advantage. And I think part of it depends on the sport. That edge will depend on the sport. Like something like tennis, for example, is not going to be something as significant as MMA. So you'd have to look at it that way. But in terms of me, it's just like, how can you be fair to the most amount of athletes? Let's say let's just try to simplify things. There's 100 trans MMA fighters and 10,000 trans, female cis fighters. Like I would say, well, how can someone has to be kind of handled in an unfair manner. Let's handle the most amount of people, like the 10,000 women, and let's try to be fair to them. And yes, I understand that like that might not be perfectly fair to the 100, trans women. Like I'm not saying we should ignore them. Like let's create a league for them. Like let's let them compete. Maybe we could dedicate some government funding to that. Like I'm not opposed to any of that. But putting them together with like regular cis women, that's just like so unfair to like these female athletes who've been competing for so long and who spend their whole life like trying to build that up. I don't know if we're necessarily disagreeing on much, but yeah, that would be like kind of my
It would
thought.
just really, it would come down to the empirics. I don't think the science at the moment currently supports the idea that a trans woman who's undergone a year or two of hormone therapy is significantly outperforming cis women. I mean, after all, even if trans women were biologically exactly on par with cis women, eventually, statistically, they would still win events because, of course, cis women, despite being cis women, win events. It's really difficult to make these cases statistically with like spurious anecdotes because that's always what the news does, right? It's like, we'll focus on this one case. You know, we're talking about large groups of people. It's impossible to know, and the circumstances differ so much. It'd be like trying to find out what the average height of an American is by like finding like a Mexican woman in LA, like a white chick in Albuquerque, and like pulling. It's like, oh well, I guess the average height is like 5'4". So I don't know. But in terms of like where to go forward, I mean, it seems like you're interested in like the evidentiary results, which is what matters to me. More research will come out in this in a short length of time, I'm sure, because it's so widely discussed. And I think I'll probably have a more definitive position when that when we have a better understanding of the effect that estrogen has on the male athletic capabilities.
I think also the problem is some things are really hard to objectively research. And like, I guess I'm just curious, like how would you objectively even research this?
Well, you can do it biologically and endocrinologically. You can look at relative levels of bone density and muscle mass. You can look at actual performances done in lab results from trans women who have been transitioning for a certain length of time. And you would have to do like a multivariate regressive analysis with these factors cross-referenced to what types of hormones they've taken, how long they've taken them, the size of their bodies, how receptive they've been. It would be, to your credit, unbelievably complicated.
It would be unbelievably complicated,
But it could
especially
be done
because there's such a small amount of trans athletes.
It
The
is
sample
true.
size is so small.
Yeah, exactly, which is why it's especially difficult right now. It is something that can be done, and I know that because there are already preliminary results that have like a few hundred participants that were that you can look at and take a look at like testosterone levels over time and like sprint distances and stuff. And I'm just interested in seeing that data field expand.
Yeah. I think unfortunately though, sometimes like people have a tendency to want to see data for everything, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in any stretch, but for some things, it's like really hard to get the data, and data can always be like it really depends on how the study is conducted. A lot of studies have an agenda, and for some of the things that we want to see data on, it may be a pipe dream. Like we'll never actually see objective data on those things. And I think for better or for worse, this might be no for worse. This would be one of them. I
Well, I
think
guess we'll find out.
I
Hey,
guess
in the meantime,
yeah.
it's so hyper politicized anyway. Nobody's
No, I
gonna
agree with
listen to
that. Yeah,
research.
yeah, we can move on to the next point. I don't think we're disagreeing on like too much. I mean, basically, your position is that like TBD. Like, I want to see more info before I make a
I
hard.
do. For the moment, I think the info supports integration because the results are pretty spurious and minor. But obviously, there hasn't been that much research on the subject, so we'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay. I guess like, is there anything else that you disagree with the red pill pickup community on?
Um, I think there's a lot of resentment towards women in these communities, but that's really going to depend on creator by creator. That's not, I don't like, that's not like a completely ubiquitous part of the program or whatever.
Sure.
Because the perception for a lot of them is that women are like the gatekeepers of sex, which socially they totally are right now, at least. So there's like this resentment, like, you know, I'm a cool guy. Like these chicks aren't even that interesting. Why won't they fuck me? And Lord knows I felt those frustrations at times, like especially when I was younger, because it's like, oh my God, like what, like why not, right? But as I got older, I guess, and I talked to more women in like friendly contexts, I didn't really realize how much head math is going on in them when like guys approach them or flirt with them. So much like, is this person a threat? Do they only want me for my body? You know, will people think that I'm a slut if I sleep with this person? And it's like really consequential for them. So I got a lot more sympathetic when I realized that.
I mean, I think no one's entitled to anything. Like, I'm not entitled to sex from a woman, and a woman's not entitled to money from me. Like, there's no like, we're not entitled to each other's time or property or body or whatever. So yeah, I mean, that's just a problematic mindset if you like feel like you're entitled to a woman's pussy or whatever. But yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement there. Anything else that stands out to you?
Actually, I want to ask you, if you're out on a date and you're getting a meal, do you split? Do you take it all? How do you pay?
Generally speaking, well, are we talking about on a date with like a brand new chick I've never met before, or like with my girlfriend? Who are we talking?
Let's say first date.
Generally speaking, I will pay. Simply because not because like I feel like I have to, but A good amount of girls will get like annoyed if you don't, and I'm just not like I'm not gonna grandstand over $30 and like potentially like lose the hookup, just to like make a point. So I have no problem like whatever. Like I typically don't go out to dinner on first dates. I will go out to drinks. Like it's $20, whatever. Like I'll just pay for it. Also, I live in Miami. Latin culture is very predominant there, and
Oh,
in
how's
Latin
the
culture,
weather over there? Is it crazy hot down there right now?
no man, it's actually really good. It's really nice. Where are
Little
you at?
warm up here in Seattle. Okay,
Oh, you're in
sorry.
Seattle?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so in Latin culture, like it's much more accustomed for the man to pay versus if I lived in New York, maybe like more girls would offer. So I just go with it. Like I'm not gonna grandstand on that.
In New York, the girls offer, and then they ask if they can fuck you. Yeah, it's bombastic.
Mm,
Um, it's no, I totally get that. I mean, I'm basically the same. Also, my I'm usually doing a little bit better than like the Tinder chicks or whatever. So like
mm,
I'll pay on that basis. Back when I was a college student though, I would always try to split,
mhm.
mostly because I
Yeah,
felt
me
like
too.
if they threw a fuss over it, it wasn't really worth talking with them further anyway.
Yeah, I have had some like pretty heated debates with like certain like feminist chicks. One specifically, I don't know if you know her, Ask Nelly. And we weren't even disagreeing on much, but she took massive issue when I said that I don't think women are entitled to a man's money, just like on a date. Like, so for example, I go out on a date with this Ask Nelly chick, like it's not automatically like it shouldn't be automatically assumed that I pay. Like I should pay because I want to out of like the kindness of my heart, not because I have to. Like there shouldn't be like some social obligation. And she took real issue with that, even though I did say that I always pay anyway. So yeah, I
No,
did.
oh no, 100%. No, fuck that. If there's ever a chick who gets like uppity about that shit, yeah, absolutely. That's such a red flag too, you know?
Yeah,
If with the whole like expectation to pay, especially when it's a gender thing as well. I just think the person who's doing better should pay, and if
I
both
agree with
people are
that.
like in
Yeah.
about the same position, they can split that. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at your chat as well, and somebody said, I wonder if he pays on a gay date, rolling on the floor laughing emoji. Yes, I do. I pay for the gay dates as well.
How
Just
does
keep
that work? Actually, just out of curiosity, you just probably
like
split the bill, or
flirting with men, or like just with men in general,
yeah,
or just
no?
like splitting the bill.
Who pays? Yeah.
Um, yeah, I usually pay because the YouTube stuff has been doing pretty
Mm,
good for me. So
okay.
I feel like it's unfair otherwise. A lot of them are like gay college students, so these people are probably having to like suck dick for weed money. So I don't feel
Huh.
I don't want to be an additional strain on their finances.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah. No, I don't think we're disagreeing much on that front.
uh,
But yeah, we got into like a real heated debate. Which is ironic because she was making the claim that oh it's so fucked up when men feel they're entitled to a woman's pussy after the date, and I was like I agree. Like just because you go on a date with a man doesn't mean you have to fuck him, but just like because we get drinks with you doesn't mean you have to pay for it. And she saw a massive double standard there, I guess, which was bizarre to me. So I'm glad you're not in that
No, I
category.
totally fucking agree. I actually got fucked over like that once. This was I was in high school at the time, so I was too young to like know better or whatever. But there was a chick at my work who was really cute, and was also not that bright. I mean, I didn't enjoy talking to her, but she was like cute. But we would talk sometimes at work, and she asked if I wanted to get dinner sometime, and I thought that she was like interested in me, and I was just like, okay, so where's the address? I went over there, and it was a fucking fancy restaurant. I'm in high school. It was like a candles on the tablecloth restaurant, I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm looking across the table at her, and I'm like, wow, you must make a lot more than I know about to afford to go here. And she's like, wait, I thought you were paying. And I was like, is there fast food nearby? And we left. We got fast food. That
Um,
bitch.
Yeah, I've had
Uh,
shit like that happen. I was in Colombia once, and I met up with this chick, and she's like clearly like a gold digger. Like it was just like she took me to like the fanciest bar. She's like, "Oh, can we go here? I love this place." I'm like, "Okay," and like the fanciest bar in Colombia is still like a cheap bar in Miami, so it wasn't a big deal. But she's just like fucking just downing drinks like just so fucking rapidly. Like she's just trying to fill up on like Patron, and then she was also going to the bathroom every 5 minutes, doing lines of blow, and then saying, "Oh, it's my stomach," like as if it's not really obvious when someone does coke. So like after like 4 or 5 of that, I was like, are you in a rush to get drunk or something? She's like, no, haha, it's okay, whatever. And she just like implied that I was gonna have to pay for the whole thing. So I was like, fuck this chick. So I went to the bartender when she was in the bathroom doing her little lines of blow. I was like, hey, let me close out my tab, but I'm just gonna pay for my drinks. I only had one shot of tequila, and then I watched from the bar as the bartender delivered her part of the check to her. Dude, I cannot make this up. She had like a little temper tantrum. She did one of these, and then she's like, ah. And then literally, I shit you not, she walked over to this really old looking white dude, just like some sugar daddy type of dude, sat next to him and started flirting with him.
Damn, just right, just
Dude,
like
right, straight, like over, just beelined over to like the oldest, whitest dude that she found and sat down next to him. I'll never forget it. It was like,
Jesus.
it was such a mind fuck.
It's Sigma on both accounts, right? Because on your hand, like closing the tab's good, but on her hand, like the shamelessness behind
Shamelessness is insane.
Immediately just running to the next guy. You know, it's whew, yeah. Fuck. You know, this is another thing about being a queer, you know, it's that the gays, I think they do this a lot less. The game is played differently with queer people.
Yeah.
Even like if it's with a girl or whatever, like if she's pan and you're pan or whatever, the game of interaction is very, very different than like straight girls. I do not like straight girls. I would take like bisexual girls any day of the week, like massively over straight girls. Not to say they wouldn't do that, but
yeah. How does it work if you don't mind me asking? Like, do you just like some days you feel like going out with chicks, some days you feel like going out with dudes? Like, what is like how does it work for you?
It's just not that much of a difference for me, really. I've been on delay right now because I have, you can see, I got surgery in my ear, so you know I'm not like going hanging out with people with a fucking tampon in my ear. But you know, apart from that, it's really just like no functional difference because in either case, like the guys are bottoms, right? So they're basically women socially. You know, you tell a loud joke, they laugh and put their hand on yours. You know, they're in doggy. You know, they're the one bending. It's the same. It's just it all blurs together. It's as long as everyone's having fun.
Because for me, there's like zero like there's just like nothing that would like like turn me on, like like being like, I know there's a lot more chicks who are bi, like there's a lot more chicks who are in the middle. I only know one other guy that I've ever met who was kind of like, who was a dude who was bi, so that's interesting. But okay, let's move on to, I guess, this. You have a video about incels, which I thought was interesting. I wanted to hear your theory. Why do you think incels are on the rise?
I think it mostly has to do with the internet and economic inequality. I think the basic gist of it, I think, is that it's way easier to find friends online than it is to find friends in person. Obviously, like it's so much easier, you know. But friends in person are like biologically necessary for people. We need that feeling, and all the social spaces where we used to do that to make friends have been like carved out. They're not, you know, it used to be like these public squares, you know, people they get to know people at their job, right? Or like school or whatever. School still works, but as for the job, you know, everyone works the gig economy now. So you don't have this one like office you work at for 20 years. You bounce around like Uber gigs when you're not working at like this one pizza joint for 6 months to the next. And it's like, it's bullshit. You can't find anyone. The managers tell you not to like talk with the other coworkers. Flirting with coworkers, even if it's mutual, is discouraged. School, like you're too young and hectic to get anything down. And you have all this shit that's keeping you from making friends, forming relationships. And then it's like, yeah, no wonder people have like completely doomer attitudes towards hooking up or getting laid. Like that's obviously going to happen. It's really, really sad. And, you know, I think it's a huge social failing, and it's mostly a white person thing too. In Latin communities, this is less of an issue because the strong emphasis on family and friends through family helps a bit. White people tend to be a bit more alienated. I think being wealthier can also hurt because you tend to live in suburbs then, and suburbs don't really have places you can walk to. There's a lot. I'm sorry. I'm totally rambling. There's so much that goes into it. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree that's a huge problem. Here, let me just tell you my theory, and you can tell me whether you agree or disagree with it, because I've thought about this a lot. I think all the things you said play a role for sure, but I think it primarily comes down to two things. I think the biggest one is that technology has changed the dating game. Women tend to want, I guess it's not just women, we all want to date up. Like, for example, if you're a guy who's a 5, you want to get a chick who's like a 7, right? Like we want the biggest and best thing, generally speaking. But for women, that's a lot more feasible. So, let's just say like 20 years ago, you're a chick living in Ohio. Maybe you want like to, rich famous guy. But if you want that, you have to fly yourself out to LA, go to a bar, hope you run into one. It's not that easy, right? So we're usually kind of lazy as humans. So most likely she'll just wind up dating some guy from her local town. Versus now, in her DMs, if she has an Instagram, there's 50 rich guys from LA DMing her and saying, hey, I'll fly you out. You don't have to do anything. Please come, right? So it's a lot easier for her to basically do what she wants to do, which is date up, have a more successful guy, right? Which, unfortunately, because she's now with that successful guy, that leaves that one guy in Ohio behind. And when that happens all over and over again, you have a lot of guys that are left behind, right? So I think for like the guys at the top 0.1%, like the celebrities or the athletes or the guys who just have a lot of like status for whatever reason, it's never been easier to get laid. Like those guys are getting more pussy than ever. Because again, technology has changed the game. Like, let's say you're a celebrity 30 years ago. How would you get laid? Well, maybe some chick recognizes you on the street. Maybe you get some fan mail and you write to her, and like maybe she comes and visits you. You get her a plane ticket. Versus now you have pussy coordinators who just go through your incoming DMs and organize like pussy appointments for you. Like it's never been easier. But again, like let's just say pussy is somewhat of a finite resources. So if the guys at the very top are getting more than ever, that kind of leaves out space for the guys at the bottom, right? I think that's the first reason. I think second reason goes back to the documentary The Social Dilemma, is the internet has made things a lot more polarizing. So let's say you have a bad date and you go on the internet and say you're pissed off and you type in, why do women suck? The algorithm is going to take note of that and start feeding you that info, and then you're seeing like incel content after incel content after doomer content, and then you become convinced that everyone else has the same issue, right? Because the algorithm for you, your YouTube feed looks radically different than my YouTube feed because you just get fed this doomer type of content, and then you get convinced. I've like debated a lot of these doomer guys, and they're convinced that like this is the reality for every guy. I'm like, dude, it's not the reality for me. Like, like I have pretty good success with chicks, right? So yeah, I think those are the two big factors. I'd be curious to see if you agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, there's a lot there that I agree. I mean, this is basically like hypergamy, right? The idea that you have like a disproportionate ability to fuck women when you're the very like up there guy, and then that kind of fucks over people in the bottom echelons. I think so. Leaving aside the essentialist bits, even if we assumed everything here is social, there are going to be imbalances as a product of different propensities towards sleeping around with men and women. Given the fact that men feel less social pressure to remain sort of chaste, you're going to have this this skew towards the top that I agree with. I think there are ways around it, or at least ways to mitigate it. But they're not ways that people always like, in my opinion. At the end of the day, of course, people should be able to fuck who they want. So what we're dealing with is a consequence of free choice. It's just about streamlining what people want to make it so that what people want is as compatible as possible with what other people want. And I think the two big things here that I think are really important for overcoming this disparity, one of them is that I think it's really important to have female friends who are just your friends. I've noticed that a lot of the channels through which women hook up and find partners and fuck around and whatever are kept kind of closed circuit relative to men. Like men will go online or Tinder and scream into their phones about but a lot of women, it's like you need like an in or a vet. And in my experience, and I'm 28, I haven't lived the whole like lifespan or whatever, but so far every group of friends that I've been in that has had more than one woman, there are people in there that are single and like looking to fuck. Maybe not necessarily you, but somebody, meaning that maybe there's just a difference in how loud everyone's being, and being sort of proximate can open up opportunities that wouldn't be present otherwise. Not to say you should only make friends with girls because of that. Just it's good to not only interact with women in efforts to fuck them. It's okay to just be friends with some of them. There's some pretty cool girls out there. The other one I think is non-monogamy. This could be my bias again because I'm queer, so, and also non-monogamous, so whatever. But I feel like, especially like for younger age demographics, like up to 30 or whatever, a lot of people on Tinder or anything else, men, women, whatever, just kind of want to fuck around, and they have looser attitudes towards the rigidity of relationships. And while I'm not saying that you need to have a girlfriend and the girlfriend is like, hey, I want to fuck like 50 other guys and you have to say yes, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that being a little more open with non-conformity towards other people's relationships might make it a bit easier to get into certain venues. Anyway, it's a very broad thing, but those are two things that I've noticed.
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing on much. I mean, I definitely agree with the first thing you said, is that there are all these like kind of closed loop social circles that where it's really easy to get laid, but you need like an in. You can't just like get in like if you're a random person. And that, yeah, I do think that women are a lot less loud about it, but they might be just as DTF, if not more. And I speak that from experience because I've been part of some of those social circles. Like I've had like situations where like I fuck one chick and she's like, she's like really happy, and then she like introduces me to her friends and I fuck her friends, right? And it's like that sort of thing. But I only got the friend because I knew that chick. Like the friend was like maybe so sketched out about meeting a new person that she would never done it if I didn't have that in. Like that's the only reason I was able to meet up with that chick, who was actually like super horny, but she was also like really sketched out about meeting strangers. So I agree with you on that point. I think the second point you made about and I'm also non-monogamous, like more or less. So it's not like we have a large personal difference, but I think like the swinger lifestyle or those type of environments, like I don't know. I don't think like most people that would work for most people. Like I think most people are just like not that sexually comfortable or whatever. I could be wrong on that. I don't know.
No, I think that's true. It's a comfort thing, if you're uncomfortable with that, you should never force yourself to. Oh, I will say this. This is actually really good advice. I'll stick by this one, okay? I'm willing to bet most of the men, well, most everyone is, but especially in the dating, dating advice scene, are probably straight. Because Lord knows if they were gay, you only need so much advice there. Gay men are very horny. But I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
participating in queer communities makes all of this so much easier. When I said earlier that I don't like straight girls as much as like bi girls or whatever, one of the reasons for this is because so much of the whole like how men treat women and how women treat men dichotomy is built up specifically in the framework of heterosexuality. Even if you're straight, there are local queer bars and queer clubs or whatever, and it's not like a big deal or whatever. You just walk around. There are just more gay areas of town than others, and the attitudes towards dating there tend to be a lot more free form. And I don't like you don't have to like lie and pretend you're gay or some shit, but like there are so many, what do you call it, culturally gay, sexually straight guys that I know. They only want to fuck women. They're only into women, okay? But you go to like, you hang out with them or whatever, and they are just, the game is just entirely different. And I think it's a little bit healthier too.
Are you
Because
talking about
people,
like straight guys who would go to like a gay club or something? Is that what you mean?
yeah, like unironically, yeah, because gay clubs aren't just for gay guys.
No,
I
I
mean,
get
it's,
that.
yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
that's a really fair point. Like I've actually like I'm completely straight, but I've been to gay clubs like in LA. They're actually a really easy place to pick up girls. Yeah, because a lot of chicks are there. They go with their gay friends. They're just there to hang out. And there's not a lot of straight guys around, so you don't have much competition. Also, the environment is very sexual, so they're more like kind of in that zone. So
Yeah,
I agree
it's
with you on
very
that.
it's freeform, and all the barriers about how men are supposed to behave with women kind of break
No.
down because a lot of the guys are gay and a lot of the girls are lesbians, meaning that the inherent preconceptive divide is not really there. And I'm not saying you should invade your local gay bar to like find the women there or whatever, but just these cultures and communities tend to be a bit more freeform, and I think that makes it a lot easier. All I know is I've completely given up on like aggressively pursuing straight women. I'll swipe left in that shit no matter how hot she is. If the bio is just like some blonde on like a Miami beach deck, and she's like upper middle class and there's nothing on her profile that's gay, fuck that. I don't care because it takes so long. But if you talk with queer people, they're pretty cool. They're funny too. I think funnier. Especially
Is that
women.
because you feel like whatever the boring white blonde chick, she's gonna play hard to get, or what's like the reason for that?
Well, I don't like that. Yeah, because if you're listen, in my experience, and again, a lot of my biases here because of this. If I'm talking to a straight chick, there is that whole fucking game. Like you
Mm.
can get through like multiple screen lengths of phone texts
Right.
before
Yeah.
it's
There's a big element of game. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I hate that.
It's
A lot
annoying.
of
I
this.
agree. Yeah.
I'm autistic. I don't have patience for any of this. But with a lot of queer girls or whatever, and you can tell because they've got pink hair or some shit, right? But you match with them, and you can be like, hey, so what are you on Tinder for? And they're like, oh, I'm looking for this, and you can be like, yeah, I'm just in the air. I'm looking for people who are like down to fuck or whatever. Are you down to fuck? And like 9 times out of 10, they're like fine with that avenue of questioning. It's just instantly you can get to the point, and that is so relaxing compared to the bullshit.
Yeah, you and I are actually the same in that regard. I also hate playing the game, even though that's basically what I teach on my channel. I'm good at it, but I don't like playing it, at least not at this point in life. Like one of my biggest turn-ons is when the chick is just like really into me and makes it like really easy. That's like my biggest turn-on is like just high levels of compliance. And like for me, it's a massive turnoff if a chick is like making it difficult for me. Like I think a lot of guys get a kick out of that. They want to like overcome the challenge. And I think I might have been like that when I was younger, but that's gone away along. Like I don't like that anymore. Like if a chick makes it like too difficult, I'll just like call her an Uber and call it a night. I just like don't want to like spend hours playing the game. I just like for me, it's such a turn on when a chick is like so into me and it's just like, I think you're really hot, Alex. Like, can you fuck me now? Like I love that shit.
And it's straightforward. And to me, it's almost like the archetypically female equivalent of guys who can't open up about their feelings, right? Like if I have a guy friend, and something's on their mind, like you can talk with me, bro. I'm right here. Like, hit me up. What's up?
No.
And a lot and in the same way, I wouldn't want to have to work through like 5 days of built up social, like calcified resistance on like, no, I feel fine. I also don't want to talk with a cute girl and have to deal with like 8 million years of built up aversion to being openly sexual. I'd rather get to it. And if she can't express enthusiastic interest anyway, I mean, that's like the whole fun, right? I don't like fuck the challenge. I hate the challenge.
Yeah, me too. I don't like it either.
Challenge if I fuck that.
Yeah.
Who cares?
We're the same in that regard. Yeah, I don't like it either. Yeah. I know. A lot of guys really do. A lot of guys genuinely do. For them, it's a turnoff if a chick makes it too easy. Like, I don't think they're lying. Like, I've had many of my friends say that. But for me, no. Like, I hate the challenge. I hate the fucking, yeah. It's a massive turnoff. Like, I just get turned off the more difficult it gets. Like, if a girl wants me to chase, I can do it. I just don't want to. Yeah. So we're the same in that regard. But let me move on to this. I think this is one thing that we're going to disagree on. It's kind of a different topic, but I think on the dating stuff, we're actually not as different as probably most people would think. You're not a fan of Jordan Peterson, right?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I kind of gathered that from your video. So I'll preface this by saying I'm not like some Jordan Peterson fanboy. I think he's kind of overrated in a lot of regards. And I don't think he says anything that's like radically super insightful. Like I think he's a smart guy, but I don't think he's like laying out some groundbreaking philosophy. However, I do very much find your claim that he's a fascist kind of problematic. Do you truly believe that, or was that you just being hyperbolic?
I think that he enables fascism as a social movement. He personally focuses too much on hyper individualism for me to fairly categorize him as a fascist. If I said he's a fascist, like in that language specifically, then that was incorrect of me.
Okay.
I do think he sort of enables that trend though.
Can you clarify, like, in which way does he enable it?
Well, I think there are a couple of tenets. The biggest one by far is his insistence on the defense of Western civilization against outwardly corrosive forces. He's a big fan of the cultural Bolshevism conspiracy theory, or cultural Marxism, they call it today, which was a Nazi conspiracy theory about how Western civilization is being eroded from within by an elite group of academically inclined, subversive types, and they're trying to make people anti-white and this and that, stuff like that really, really bugs me.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to clarify. Do you think that he overblows it, or that he's completely wrong about that, or he's just like overblowing it?
I think he's completely wrong. I think what he's referring to is just the progressive force that made Western civilization good to begin with. Because I feel like if he'd been around 400 years ago, he would have called like the Enlightenment thinkers that exactly. Because if we're ever talking about elite intellectuals undermining the tradition of Western civilization, okay, Voltaire is right up there at the top. The Enlightenment thinkers are right up there at the top. Teaching us to hate our monarchs and so on. I think it's basically it's just a reaction to progressivism that is being framed through the logic of civilizational conflict. I think that's really dangerous.
But look, my opinion is that he heavily overblows it. I don't think there's like this big conspiracy or like it's prominent, but there are elements of it which I think are small, but they do exist, like some anti-white sentiment. Like, I've met chicks like that, like, and it's really bizarre to me. Or like on TikTok, you see it a lot. Like, oh, you're a white guy, fuck you. Like automatically, like, okay, sorry for being born white. Like, let me call my parents and ask for a refund. Like that sentiment does exist. I don't think it's nearly as prevalent. But would you say it just doesn't exist at all? Like,
oh no, it totally exists. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's existed for a long time, right? I mean, when the slaves were on the plantation, I imagine a lot of the words they exchanged when they're, the white.
Yeah, they probably weren't too happy about that. Yeah,
they're probably a little unhappy. I totally. Yeah, I think. By the way, I think it's super cringe This
Okay.
the anti-white, like the actual anti-white bullshit or whatever.
No.
I'll make jokes. I love my edgy jokes. I love my race jokes.
Yeah, me too.
But there are people who clearly like actually don't really like white people that much. I
Yeah.
think it's super cringe.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, but I think it's important to understand that while that sentiment is really, really bad, it's not really a component to a broader social force against white people. Whereas if you look at other forms of prejudice like sexism or anti-black discrimination, you can see like really marked social trends. Even if those are legal discrimination today, there's like very clear patterns or like lines left in the ground as a product of that, which warrant more engagement. If the anti-white stuff ever became civically like relevant, then I think it should be pushed back against as aggressively.
Yeah, no, I do think he and like somewhat similar people who are like in that category tend to overblow it. Like, I don't think it's like nearly as prevalent as they think it is. I think more of what is a more valid concern is the push against censorship and cancel culture, which I think is very real and something I've experienced. Like today, I got my TikTok taken down,
Oh, I'm
which
sorry.
is super fucking annoying. But that is one thing that I think does exist, and it's like heavily on the left. Like that is an issue that exists like primarily on the left. Like you would agree that's like an actual issue that like has social consequences, right?
I think it's an issue, but I don't really think it's a left bias thing. I think in terms of cultural markers, I mean, people of all political persuasions are going to try to say like, take this down here and take this down here. But I think the main difference is that the right makes an actual legislative effort to restrict speech. They've been banning books from schools recently. You've been having these laws that are trying to like censor discussion of like gay people in like elementary school or whatever. Like you can't mention it, stuff like that. These are very legislatively relevant. But usually when it's like what's going on cancel culture wise from the left, it's like accounts get taken down for overstated cases of hate speech. I've been banned from Twitch twice actually. The second time it was because I said honky, which is a racial slur.
Right. No.
Yeah. So, not to say that's anti-left or whatever. That might have just been anti-me, but I agree the general trend is an issue. I just don't think it's like a left is causing the wave thing. Oh, cracker, not honky. Sorry, it was cracker. I get all the anti-white terms mixed up.
Mm. I guess it's done differently on both sides. Like, yeah, you're right that the right does do more with the legislation. I guess the big tech companies are pretty left leaning, so it would make no sense for them to, like basically go after like liberal people, right? Because like obviously they're left leaning as it is. I mean that's problematic in of itself, but that's getting into like a complete different issue. Okay, well let's go back. Let's go back to the Jordan Peterson thing. Okay,
I've
you
got
don't.
till the end of the hour, by the way, in terms
Okay,
of
cool.
time frame.
How much longer do you have? Like 20 minutes?
Yeah, just over 20.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's do the Jordan Peterson thing, and maybe we can take like a few questions because I think we basically covered all the dating topics in my
I've
opinion.
really enjoyed the convo, by the way.
Yeah, me too, dude. It's interesting because we really don't disagree on nearly as much as I thought we would.
I think I think this would be one of those rare examples of actual civil discourse, which I get to have so infrequently. I
Really?
appreciate it. But anyway, yeah, hit me up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard, man. I mean, like, yeah, I'm pretty chill with all my debates and whatnot. I haven't had like any too confrontation. The only one that I had was with the Ask Nelly chick, and because she just kept getting pissy at me. But anyway, so onto the Jordan Peterson thing. So when you say he enables fascism again, like in what way does he do that? Like, did you think his rhetoric encourages it, or like what exactly?
Yeah, it's mainly that cultural Marxism thing. Because if you think Western civilization is being rotted away from within by an elite group of academics who are promoting anti-West and anti-white ideology, there are two things that follow from that. First, democracy isn't going to save you, and second, academia isn't going to save you, which means you need an anti-democratic and anti-intellectual political movement to seize power and maintain the strength of Western civilization. And in practice, this is almost always going to be a fascist sentiment.
Um,
Um, and there are legitimate concerns I think that JP could point out, but I feel like the framework through which he's addressing these problems is one which naturally begets like a kind of a fascist response.
I would argue that's a pretty like out there logical jump. Like for example, to give an analogy, like going back to what we were talking about earlier about how with hypergamy and women dating up, it would be a very extreme logical jump that for someone to say, well, because we're discussing that women date up, that we want laws to restrict women from doing that, and we want to make laws that force women to marry within their whatever fucking sexual market value. Like that, we don't want that, clearly, right? So I feel like my thoughts when I see like Jordan Peterson talk about that stuff isn't so much that we need to go like really far in the other direction and enable fascism, but that maybe we just need to reform these academic institutions. Maybe we need more free speech. Maybe we need to challenge our ideas a little bit more. Not that we need like fascism or like some strong man to like come in and save us.
No, I get that. It's just that it is ripped point for point from the cultural Bolshevism thing, which was the big Nazi talking point. Of course, they thought the elite academics were Jews. They just said Jews. But in terms of the role they said the Jews played, it's basically exactly the same. You had left-leaning academic intellectuals who would pervert the sciences in order to get people to, heed degenerate and anti-civilizational prospects. And of course, we know how Nazi Germany ended up. They went at least a little bit fascist. I think it's possible to take a look at what he says and arrive at more moderate conclusions, but I don't think academia needs reforming in the way he's describing. I think that his views on academia are just conspiratorial. I don't think there's an anti-West bias. I think there's a bias towards introspection, which we confuse with anti-West bias because we're so used to the jingoism of American exceptionalism that when you start hearing people say like, hey, this country's actually kind of fucked up in a lot of ways, like it seems like it's an attack, but I think it makes us stronger.
I mean, I would argue there are some legit issues in academia that have popped up in the last 5-10 years. Like, for example, one that I see as highly problematic is this idea of some colleges actually having like black only dorm rooms, right? Like segregation, which is like up until very recently, that was like a very like not progressive idea. That was like a very backwards idea, but then somehow it's become like progressive. Like, oh, let's try segregation again. Didn't really work the first time, but maybe it'll work the second time. Like, I think that there's a tendency in academia, especially sometimes, to go so far in one direction with the pursuit of social justice that you wind up actually going in the other direction and doing something as counterintuitive as actually like fucking like having segregation living policies, which is just so dumb, and that's beyond me.
I won't defend that. A lot of that historically back university black only dorms, they go back like a really long time. A lot of their origins are because their initial dorm segregation was, well, I mean, it wasn't self-segregation, it was just regular segregation. But in how they manifest today, though, like, yeah, I agree, it's pretty weird. I can
We want
understand
like the races to like live together and like get to know each other and like be friends and like not.
Yeah,
just,
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of, the only thing that I'm okay with is a lot of college campuses will have queer dorms now. I don't even think you have to be gay to be there. I think you just have to be okay with like rainbows plastered everywhere, because oh my fucking god, do they do that. In terms of like this race, that race dorm, I agree it's largely counterproductive. I disagree with it. In terms of the academic production of these universities, though, I think for the most part it's fine. Academia is supposed to be contentious. It's supposed to be controversial. It incites discourse, and I'm happy that discourse exists, even if sometimes some elements of the discourse get kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I think there definitely should be discourse. I think discourse is a good thing. I think the discourse becomes problematic though when one side is being silenced. That's when, and again, like I'm generally speaking, like if you look at like my political leanings, I'm probably much more on the left than I am on the right. Like in terms of like the big issues, like environment, taxation, legalization of drugs, and whatnot. Uh, but I'm certainly not in favor of like silencing anybody. But when you have an environment where I don't think most colleges are guilty of this, but some colleges where people are being silenced, like that becomes like problematic in my opinion.
No, it depending on how it's done. I'm sensitive to this, especially historically, because back in the 1950s during the McCarthyist era, the group most frequently censored were leftists, right? We were fighting the Soviet Union, so communist professors were getting axed left and right.
Right.
And I fully support the free participation in discourse. Oftentimes, the issue I have is that there's this mix-up where a person will be kicked from academia because they suck, but then they'll say it's because they're being silenced. To an
Sure, okay,
extent,
fine.
Jordan Peterson did this as well. And this is not meant to be an attack on him. I think this is fairly uncontroversial. He's not famous for his academia, he's famous for his self help and political advocacy.
Yeah,
The academic stuff he did for decades pretty quietly before the whole
no,
beast. Yeah,
no.
yeah. So he left academia just a couple of months ago. And he talked about how the university was inhospitable and how, he was being silenced and the college wouldn't let him do anything. And I don't believe him. He was a huge draw for University of Toronto. I think he left because he makes way, way, way more money and gets way more of his political goals achieved being an advocate publicly than he could by teaching a classroom of 30 people and dealing with their classwork. Like, I think he just left because he wanted to, but he treats it like it's him being excised from academia. And that frustrates me because it's like,
Mm.
how, like, yeah,
Yeah, I don't have enough info to dispute that. You might be right on that. I mean, logically, it would kind of make sense. Like, you'd feel like he's just outgrown that. Like, he's just so much more popular. Like, he's just like one of the most, like, frankly, one of the most popular people, like, in terms of
yeah.
like YouTube and whatnot. So it would make logical sense for him to just like not want to, teach a class of 30 people anymore, unless he's like super passionate about teaching, which, I don't think he is that much. At least I never got that vibe from him. I guess like this kind of goes into one of my pet peeves with like the hard left, I guess, or whatever, the far leaning left, is a tendency to throw out labels inappropriately, I guess. Like, and this is maybe it's because I'm sensitive to because it's happened to me so many times. But like on TikTok, like all the time, I get accused pedophile, rapist, woman beater, and like there's like zero evidence of any of that stuff. Like I've never obviously done any of that. I find all that stuff like disgusting. But it's like what like I'll always like go down this line of questioning. I'll be like, okay, well, why do you think I'm a rapist, right? Oh, because you have this video where you say you should double text a girl. I'm like, okay, that maybe means I double text a girl, not that I want to rape a girl. So like, but it's always like, like this labels are just like thrown around so easily. So I guess like, I don't know, that's something that I would just like say like maybe be a little bit more weary of like going forward, just like because the label of fascism has like a very, very negative implication. Obviously it's
Yeah, I'd
like,
say so. To some people, some like it. I do agree. It's something I've tried to wheel back a little bit. I stick by the enables fascism thing, but I do think there's a meaningful difference between being one and enabling one. Technically Nietzsche enabled Nazi Germany because they his sister
yeah,
reprinted his work and they misinterpreted the Ubermensch thing. But
yeah,
Nietzsche was not a Nazi, actually, not even
yeah.
close.
Yeah, you can
Um,
make the argument about like Karl Marx enabled like Stalin or whatever. You can make that argument about like a whole bunch of things, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
happening all over these days. I mean, like right now, elementary school teachers are getting called groomers for saying that like men can marry men, the whole
Yeah,
Republican
yeah,
Party
yeah, I
is.
agree. That
Yeah,
stuff is
it's no, I'm telling you, I agree. It's like the politicization thing. Like we're not even having conversations anymore, right? It's just insane partisan bickering all over the place.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's interesting. Yeah, we're really not disagreeing on much. I guess. Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything you want to bring up?
I mostly want to watch the debate you had with that one feminist that you referred to.
Oh, Ask Nelly. Yeah, that was a
Hashtag,
one.
how is that spelled? Is Ash or ass?
Ask, like ask.
Ask Nelly. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. Gotcha. Um, yeah, no, I guess no, I think this is a pretty reasonable take. I think that dating is really, really difficult for men,
yeah,
in ways unique to how women deal with their own stuff for the most part. I think men have a very unique set of issues, and it's frustrating because men who express frustration at the unfairness and the rigidity of the social roles they
mhm,
have to overcome get maligned, like they get a really rough treatment in a lot
yeah.
of
And they
ways.
get shamed. Yeah,
Yeah, which sucks because
yeah,
women, in a lot of ways, women won't. In a lot of spaces, if a woman is like, I think it's bullshit that I should have to deal with this, and men will do this, and blah, 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 like, not to say they won't face any criticism, but a decent number of people will agree. But if guys are like, yeah, I think it's bullshit that women like play this game with me, and I think it's bullshit that I'm expected to pay, like, people will not always respond very well at all. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, dude. There's so much irony in like what I've realized in the last year or so, like dealing with these spaces. Like, for example, I'll give you a pretty funny example. On the on the hard left end of the spectrum, on the feminist side, you have women saying, "Oh, we women have it hard. Men have it so easy being a man, so hard being a woman." And honestly, we women, we don't even need men. And then all the way on the other side, you have it's so easy being a woman. It's so hard being a man. Women, it's so easy. If only I was a woman, everything would be so easy. And honestly, we men, we don't even need women. And then literally, if you take all these sides on the opposite extremes who never ever run into each other, talk to each other because they don't even know the other side exists, they actually want the same thing. It's so funny. It just
It's no,
becomes
it's like the cursed union of MGTOW guys and political lesbian types from the 1960s, where you had all these heterosexual women being like, we're not going to enable the patriarchy by popping pussy anymore. We're going off to our all female sexless communes, and it's beautiful. If only they could meet, what a what a joyous union they would have.
yeah, but
God,
they never will, and they hate talking to each other. And if they do ever interact, it's super contentious, and they start like yelling at each other and shit. I've seen like some of those debates. It just becomes cringe. It's just like people talking over each other, which I
they
never
deserve
like.
each other. That's they,
They hate each other, but they also
it's
love each other. Yeah,
yeah.
basically. Yeah, but yeah, I agree with your point. Like, it always kind of was like a pet peeve of mine when people like say, well, like when anytime a man brings up any issue he has, and he's not necessarily saying that we need to have like some legislation or some laws to fix it. He's just like bringing up like a thing that's frustrating for him, and he just gets like shamed. Oh, well, you're a man. You should be lucky. Okay, yeah, I mean, there's some advantages to being a man, but there's also some difficulties. So yeah, I've always tried
No,
to push
no,
back
yeah, no, I
against that.
completely agree. And a lot of these guys end up falling into really, really bad movements, like the incel. Like
Yeah,
some of the incel communities are like suicide cults, basically,
yeah,
and they fall
yeah.
into that. And I think that's really, really, really sad. So the more this gets discussed in like a reasonable way, the less likely that is to happen. And hopefully,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The problem is I don't know if you've seen like the old debates I've done with like the incels and the black pillars. I think I've done probably more than anyone I know personally. And it's such a frustrating conversation. I mean, you'll just have to watch those debates for yourself. But it always ends in the same way, with them saying, "Well, you just don't understand
Yeah.
because you have your pickup status fame and you have a like you have a I don't know, I don't have a good head of hair. You have a good face line. You have a I don't, they all use all these weird terms that I can't remember. But
Oh,
it's like
your bicentennial tilt or some
yeah,
shit.
you just
They
don't understand the struggle, or whatever. Or the other assumption is, well, actually, you're actually fairly ugly, Alex, so you must be lying about everything. You don't actually have a girlfriend, or if you do have a girlfriend,
not ugly. What the
you're paying
fuck?
her tens of thousands of dollars. Actually, there was some of that in the chat earlier. You're paying her money to be with you because you're too ugly to get a girl like that. It's always like just like really cringe sentiments, and like they just never like take you at your word. I'm like, dude, like I used to suck with girls. I don't anymore. Like I do have a cool girlfriend. Like it's doable. Nah, you must be lying.
You
Or
know, can I? Because I have to dip soon. Can
yeah,
I draw a funny parallel here?
yeah, go for it, man.
Okay, this is I'm stepping way outside of my allowed zone here, but there's the LGBT subsection of 4chan is famously overrun with depressed trans girls. They basically run that whole area,
Mm,
and what's interesting is that the logic and the language used there is basically identical to the logic and the language used in incel communities, to the point where you'll have perfectly attractive trans women. I mean, even conventionally attractive. Like
mm.
broadly, being told by everyone else there that they should just kill themselves because it's worthless and they'll never be, they'll never look good or whatever. And what you described right there, like that you can't reason through to them. It's a whole other thing where you'll have like there's always something like, I'll never be able to overcome this 1/8 of an inch of skin on this part of my body or some
Yeah.
bullshit like that. And I think the reminder there, like the experience of incels, or of people who are feeling depressive in that way, I think it's genuinely universal. It's genuinely something everyone can fall into, and it's really just which social systems kind of guide you into them. And I think that universality should be a sign of hope, because it means that no one is truly uniquely fucked. Lots of people have been in that vote, and I think it's possible to climb out. Like pretty much always. Like I was fine in high school. I was like a fat, acne-ridden loser in high school, and I did okay. A lot of it really is just about being kind of good spirited about it. You know.
Yeah, not being a victim and not becoming extremely pessimistic. I think that's the biggest thing. I think once you adopt a victim mindset, it's really really hard. I've seen dudes who adopt a victim mindset because then you start seeing everything as against you, and anyone who gives you advice that's different is attacking your identity because you're a victim, and he doesn't understand how much of a victim you are. So I think that's the biggest trap people can fall into: start seeing themselves as victim. on both sides, on the the MGTOW or incel side, or on like the hard feminist side. It's like, oh, men are out to get me. Like, like that's also a problematic mindset.
No, I agree. I think that we should be ruthlessly critical of failing social institutions, but I think that as individuals, we should always be sort of stupidly optimistic about our ability to fix our own problems. Like socially, you can blame anything and everything, but individually, you should always try your best. And there's no excuse not to, really.
I agree with that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, man. I think this is a really good discussion. I think we should do another one at some point in the future again. But yeah, it's interesting. We really didn't disagree as much as we thought of. But maybe in the future, people. I'm sure a lot of people in the comments will be like, "Oh, what about this one thing?" So I'm sure we'll have plenty more ideas for next time on things that we
I'm
actually do disagree on.
sure they will. And it's fun to have a nice convo now and again as well. I really do appreciate you having me on.
Yeah,
Um,
dude, it was a pleasure. You
and
really don't have that many like nice combos.
Yeah, no, well, I certainly, yeah, no, I certainly don't. I don't. Yeah, it's very
Really?
rare. Um, yeah, you're well, can you, since I guess we're at the end now, I guess we'll shout ourselves out. So could you go and then I'll
Sorry, can I what?
shout ourselves out for the
Oh, yeah,
fine
yeah,
people
sure,
watching.
yes. My name is Alex. I run a business called Playing with Fire. We make practical, no bullshit dating advice. Yeah, that's basically me. What about you?
And I'm Vosh, and I so let's just talk about stuff. I really appreciate the convo. I hope you have a wonderful day. You have
Yeah,
a
man,
beautiful
you as
dog,
well.
by the way.
Yeah, man, for sure. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, he's the best. Cool, man. Good chatting. Nice to meet you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I guess I could answer some questions while I'm on already. But yeah, this was I thought this was a really good discussion. We really did not disagree on nearly as much as I thought we would, which is always interesting. And I find that happens so often when I do these debates. It's just like you think there's going to be a big disagreement, but then actually when you talk out ideas and the rhetoric gets put aside, you find out you don't disagree as much. Which is why I think that doing debates like this, like either in person or like virtually, not doing it in the comments is the way to go, because when you're like debating people in the comments, it's just like talking points, and then you never get to like a nice middle ground, and you can never get any nuance. So yeah, you need to do like debates like this where you're actually talking to the person, because otherwise it just becomes talking points after talking points. And yeah, I wish there was more people like Vosh. Like I don't know, I mean, like the vibe I got is that he's pretty left leaning, and I find that people further on the left are usually more hesitant to do debates. But he's not even that far on the left, I think. Debatable. But he's very open to having debates, which I respect. I wish more people like did that. And it's not to make it like a left right thing. I mean, I would say like on a lot of political issues, I'm fairly on the left. But I think my mindset is more in line with people on the right, meaning like I'm very open. I don't give a shit. I don't get triggered. I don't need like a safe space. I don't like to label people. I'm open to discussion and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. It was a good discussion, but yeah, you guys can let me know in the comments if there's stuff that we missed. I'm sure there's a whole bunch. He has so much content. A lot of his long form content. I probably could have done a better job with the research and trying to find more stuff. But I'll be honest, I spent all day like researching his content. I put Natty on it. I put Indian P on it. We were all researching it, and we just could not find that much stuff that we disagree on. But I only went through like a fraction of his content, like maybe 5%. So because he has so much content, like he's been on YouTube for so long, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that I missed that I might potentially disagree with him on that I just don't know about. So that's why I kind of was trying to like spend a lot of time establishing what his positions are. But I'm certainly not going to disagree for the sake of disagreeing. That's just like I hate when people do that. Like if someone, so if I feel like someone makes a good point, I'll just say I agree with you. I'm not going to be like, well, what about this? I hate when people do that shit. I'll just like you'd be like, okay, yeah, you actually made a good point. I'll agree with you. So, and I think he's like that too. Like he doesn't seem to be like so determined to win at all costs, which is like a pet peeve of mine. Like he's like willing to listen and like be like, okay, yeah, you made a good point on that. So yeah, but I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff that we missed. We can definitely do a part two. Yeah, I'm totally down with that. It was a cool combo. I gotta watch. I learned while as I was about to go live that Vosh debated Destiny. So I want to watch that and see what happened. Yeah, I'm curious to see that debate. But yeah, it fucking sucks. I did get kicked off TikTok today, which is so fucking annoying and pisses me off because I spent like a year building that account. I have hundreds of videos on there, always like fucking respected the rules, watered down my content not to go against the rules. And they still fucking ban me. Why? Because a bunch of pissed off like SJWs think I'm a misogynist. It's bullshit. It was like extremely annoying. So I'm appealing it. Hopefully I win the appeal. But yeah, it was just fucking ridiculous. And you know what sucks too is like the hardcore SJW people, like by when TikTok bans me, that means they don't have to get exposed to my content. So that means that the discussions, the potential debates and discussions that we could have had are not going to happen. And that's like I see is so problematic. I think there should be so many more debates in these communities. And people with different ideas should talk to each other, not like fucking hide in their echo chambers. Okay, let me just answer a few questions. I guess if you guys have any questions, let me know. Did TikTok say why they ban? Nope, they never do. They just say violating policies. None of these companies ever tell you why. They never tell you why they ban you. Live as Chuck called you incel. That's crazy. I mean, it's so funny. I constantly shit on incels. I don't know how they could think that I'm an incel, like in any way. Like I think I'm literally the opposite of an incel. Like I talk about banging chicks all the time. Like I have a girlfriend. She's been on my videos. I have hundreds of videos with girls. I love girls. Like how could anyone think I'm an incel is just bizarre to me. But yeah, that's weird. Uh, yeah, that's true. I would show them respect. I've been respectful to literally every single person that's ever been on a podcast, my channel. The thing is that the way I see it, if someone's like someone being on my channel is like kind of like coming into my house. If you come to my house, I will be respectful to you as long as you don't do anything like super fucked up. My attitude varies based on the person's demeanor. So if I feel like someone's being very disgenuine, I'll be a lot harsher. But if someone's being respectful to me, and being genuine, I'll always be respectful to them, even if we radically disagree. Okay. As far as dating advice, how would you open combo after about a week? Do not engage due to laziness. I would just don't mention it. I would just make a joke or re-engage. Okay, what else do we have? Yeah, that's true. Yep, that's true. That chat showed that's an interesting point. Um, hmm. But I would say, okay, the thing is that I think that I bring on like I think that people on the far left or the far right are not going to like me because of my personality and the stuff I say. So I think I attract more people who are more moderate and like down the center in their views and more balanced. Uh, that's not to say that I think that Bosch is unbalanced. I just think he's going to attract a different crowd than me. Um, do you agree that the black pill mostly shows the true importance of looks and that looks determine how your personality is perceived? I don't understand the question. The word mostly is used like a bunch of times. You have to. I'm not sure what the question is, so please restate that. Oh yeah, I definitely do. I think a lot of SJWs would call him misogynistic for sure. He's definitely too moderate to be accepted by like the hardcore SJWs. Alex, you say more on the left. What do you mean? What are some bigger points you think are important? Thoughts on taxation? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too into politics, but if you're curious, what I mean is like I would be probably considered more of like a classical liberal or libertarian. Like, what are some things that I would agree with the left on? Like, I think like marijuana should be legalized. That used to be much an issue that was much more popular on the left. I think that there should be environmental protection. The EPA should be made strong. I think the environment should be protected strongly. There should be national parks and whatnot. There shouldn't be like air pollution or water pollution. That's an issue that's more associated with the left. I think that corporate loopholes should be closed. So, like companies like Amazon or GE should not have to pay less taxes than me. That's another one. I think offshore tax havens should be limited, if not eliminated. Um, let's see. What I'm not for raising taxes or anything like that. I think that socially, I'm pretty liberal. Like, I think whatever, like, gay people should be allowed to get married if they want to. I don't have to see any issue with that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think like on like those issues, like on the issues that were talked about like 20 years ago, on more of them. But there's some that I would be on the right about. It just depends on the issue. But yeah, I don't want to like get too into politics unless you guys are like super curious about that. Um, you're banned, but your videos are still up. Why are they? Unless I won the appeal. Let me check. We appealed it like 4 hours ago. Um, I don't see any signs that we won the appeal, but maybe we did. I'll check it out afterwards. Do you go into this debate wanting to be more debate? It feels like you're both walking eggshells a bit and turned into more. No, not really. I just go into it. My mindset is I try to go into it open and just see. The thing is, what I don't do is I don't have disagreements for the sake of disagreements. So I go into it trying to figure out what the person's positions are, and then I honestly evaluate whether we radically disagree on them or not, and what the level of disagreement is. And if there's not much disagreement, I'm not going to try to create a disagreement. I think that's the difference between me and a lot of other debaters. I just won't do that because I think it's super lame. And it turned out that a lot of things we were not that different. I mean, the only thing that we were kind of different on was trans sports or whatever. But again, that was so outside the scope of this channel that I didn't want to make it like a big debate topic. No, the other thing that we were definitely disagree on is whether whether having a genderless society is a good thing, like whether we should do away with genders. I definitely don't think we should. But again, it's so outside the scope of this channel that I didn't want to like make that the whole point of the debate. So yeah. Okay, what else do we have? Alex, how is Rollo not disingenuous for saying debate is necessary for keeping creators? How is Rollo not disingenuous? I think Rollo is very disingenuous. I've made that argument many, many, many times. Many times. I think Rollo is extremely disingenuous. So, can you address your open relationship? How your girl smashes whoever and you pay the bills? Yeah, this is like such a weird assumption that I pay the bills. My girlfriend, frankly, makes a lot of money. I mean, I make a lot of money too. So she does not need me to pay the bills. She has more than enough of her own money, and frankly, she has a lot of pride around that. So I don't, even if I want to, I don't think she would let me pay her bills. And she smashes whoever. She does not smash whoever. She smashes me, and that's it. So yeah, what is this based on? You want to come on for a debate, please, Dad? I'll do a quick one with you because this notion is so absurd, like based on like zero fact. Okay. Black Pill explains how looks determine almost all success in your life. Taller equals more respected. Uh, no, I somewhat disagree. I don't think looks determine almost all your success. I disagree with that. I think looks are responsible for some of your success, but I don't think they determine almost all your success. I fundamentally disagree with that assumption. I know so many counterexamples to that of people who don't have good looks who are very successful. So no. Um, do you think Undead Chronic is creating a radical misogynistic subcult with a warband, Alex? Um, I don't want to say misogynistic. I hate throwing that word around. Um, I think he has some really, really fucking weird notions, and I think his chat supports those really weird notions. But I'm not going to make the claim he's misogynistic. I don't know enough about him. Uh, okay, what else? What does she do for work? I mean, I don't want to like give away too much of her personal info because she's not like a YouTuber or something. But let's just say she works in marketing and she's like high up on the corporate ladder. Why does? I don't know because he's a massive pussy. I guess I'm not really sure. Okay. I have the clip, idiot. It was one of your old live streams. She literally said she's free to smash whoever, and you agreed. You can't defake yourself out of this one. Okay, find the clip. Please pull it up. You could. Why don't you want to come on for live? Well, we can do it tomorrow. Why don't you come? Why don't you pull the clip and you can play it on my channel? I'd love to see this clip or how badly you misinterpreted it. Yeah, go ahead. Find the clip. Okay. Um, how do you make sure your girlfriend doesn't cheat? I mean, there's a high level of trust. I've never caught her in a lie or anything like that. So, yeah, I have no reason to doubt her. But I mean, I don't have like any kind of enforcement. Like, I don't check her phone or like make her submit weekly lie detector tests. I think a lot of it is trust. If I didn't trust her, I would not be in a relationship with her. She would just be my fuck buddy. But I have a high level of trust. Again, that's because I've known her for a long period of time. Never caught her in any lies. She's always been honest with me. So, I have no reason to doubt her. Yeah, it's coming from because I spoke at his conference once. He made the assumption that he pays my bills. In reality, me and like Dream, I've gotten a grand total of $0 from Dream Johnson. Even when I spoke at his conference, I paid for my own hotel and my own accommodations. I got like I've literally made zero, like $0.0 from Anthony. So the notion is just like beyond absurd. Yeah, I did. It was fucking hilarious. I found that really funny. Okay, what else do we have? I like how this Billy's dad guy just disappeared. Like this happens every time. I'm like, okay, dude, come on, let's play the clip, and they always just disappear, and then he's gonna come back in like fucking like 3 live streams from now. Oh, by the way, they always do this. Um, do you think women who make more money are a better match for you at this point in your life? No, not necessarily. Her the amount of money she makes has zero to do with my level of attraction for her. I really that has no role. It's just a coincidence that she's financially successful. It was not something that I was looking for. I don't really care if the girl makes money or she doesn't make money. You know, I don't care. I mean, I guess I don't want a chick who's like super broke. So I do want her to have a job, but she doesn't have to be like financially successful. That's pretty irrelevant to me. Um, women aren't real. Debate me. Fuck, you're right, man. Uh, yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, I think this was a good debate. I enjoyed that. I appreciate you guys showing up. This was a good discussion. I think me and Bosch both enjoyed it. So let me know in the comments if you think that I missed anything, and let us know. I'll hit him up and we can do a part two. So just let me know what else you guys want me to debate him on. I mean, I really don't want to go like too far in the political direction and make this like a political debate because I feel like that would be so outside the scope of this channel. But if there's like really high interest in that, I'll do it, I guess. All right, guys. Peace.